Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 1301, The Golden Door of Light. The new rules of the illusion battlefield changed the course of the competition and caught everyone off guard. It took 3 days for the situation to settle down and for the participants to get used to the new rules. Many warriors had already fled the cities the moment the rules changed. The cities that used to be the safest places in the illusion battlefield became the most dangerous ones after the new rules were announced. And with nowhere to hide in the cities, most of the warriors had retreated to the wilderness. The greedy warriors took advantage of the new rules and wreaked havoc on the cities. They hunted and killed the inferior warriors for their illusion points. When the cities were finally exhausted, the warriors had set their eyes on the new target, the endless wilderness outside the cities. The endless wilderness housed all kinds of fierce beasts, and right now, it was also a place of refuge for other warriors who fled the cities to avoid the slaughter. If the greedy warriors were lucky enough, not only would they get illusion points from the fierce beasts, but they could also chance upon other warriors. The wilderness hunt had begun. The warriors from the entire illusion battlefield scattered rapidly, some of them were the hunters, while the others were the prey. While most of the superior warriors began their hunt, Zen had no intention of participating in it. He didn't see the need to rush into the wilderness for a few 100,000 illusion points. At the moment, Zen had ranked second in this supreme world. It was quite an accomplishment already. But he didn't want to settle with that. His goal was to hunt the other 9 top 10 warriors. At first, Zen had no definite plan on how to obtain more illusion points. Up to this point, the warriors that he had slain were not targeted by him in advance. Those were either the prey he had chanced upon or the warriors who tried to kill him but got killed by him instead. He then realized that if he wanted to promote his rank in the whole universe, he should focus on catching the bigger lions instead. However, it would still be difficult for him to find the top-ranking warriors in this chaotic and vast sea of people. But first, he had to leave the city and head towards the wilderness. On the other hand, Janet, Jeffrey and Haley were more focused on promoting their rankings in the current stage. Currently, Janet was ranked 63rd in this supreme world, Jeffrey was ranked the 57th, while Haley was the 81st. Only the top 50 warriors of each supreme world would qualify to enter the second stage. The 3 weren't too far off from ranking 50th, so with the new rules on play, they could improve their ranking in no time. It looked like fate was on their side. With Zen's team temporarily being dissolved, each member would have the time and focus to improve their ranking at their own pace. Meanwhile, Zen had finally arrived in the wilderness. He found a corner where he settled in for a while and once again took out the saint-killing spear. He noticed something odd about the spear, but he shrugged it off and poured his chaotic energy into it. The saint-killing spear looked like it saw the rain fall after the long drought. As he poured his chaotic energy into it, sounds of popping beans could be heard, and the surface of the spear started cracking. After carefully sizing it up, he discovered that the saint-killing spear was slightly bent. The saint-killing spear was made of black and white divine woods that intertwined with each other. The divine wood was the sturdiest wood in the universe and almost indestructible in the heavens. But Zen could not understand how this kind of wood could be easily bent. He took another look and found a bit of green within the chapped crack in the middle of the saint-killing spear. When he looked closer to examine, he could not believe what was in there. 2 bright green sprouts were growing in the crack. I know that the divine woods are special and immortal. But these were already forged into the saint-killing spear. There's no way they could grow these sprouts. There could only be a reason for the sudden growth of these sprouts, and it must have been because of the chaotic energy. The further he analyzed it, the more his theory seemed true. But then again, it was just his theory. He still lacked a deeper understanding of the divine woods. And right now, he was still unclear about the changes occurring within the saint-killing spear, and no one was there to explain it. He really wanted to bring the saint-killing spear out of the illusion battlefield. To do so, he had to make a copy of the spear. Zen had thought of this earlier. The spear in Zen's hands was just an illusion, and the real one in the outside world was in Malachi's hands. After all, it was Malachi who had taken the spear into the illusion battlefield. The saint-killing spear was most likely located in the core area of the demon knight race, hence, it would be quite difficult to obtain the spear. But if he could duplicate it in the Hall of Causality and take it out of the illusion battlefield, would it work like the genuine one? No matter what, Zen had already made up his mind in making a copy of the saint-killing spear. Suddenly, a ray of light flashed in his hand and an iron ticket appeared. With his current rank, the battle at this stage no longer held much meaning for him. He wouldn't mind spending 5 million illusion points just to enter the Hall of Causality once more. Besides, the number of illusion points awarded in the Hall of Causality was also decent. However, entering the Hall of Causality could be risky for any warrior. For those vying to be on the top 50 like Haley and Janet, they would rather choose to rob other warriors of their illusion points instead of risking their lives in the Hall of Causality. They could also lose the chance of being part of the top 50 if they died in the Hall of Causality. But as for Zen, even if he did die in the Hall of Causality and lost half of his illusion points, he wouldn't fall off the top 50 in this current stage. On the other hand, if he did succeed, he could copy the saint-killing spear. It was a risk worth taking. But will anyone still be willing to enter the Hall of Causality? Zen thought to himself. When he checked the iron ticket in his hand, he was filled with hope. The iron ticket showed Zen that there were already 9 warriors gathered in the Hall of Causality, and there was only 1 slot left to open the Hall of Causality. These 9 warriors were some of the low-ranking warriors who weren't willing to give up just yet. However, with their current accumulated illusion points, they still would not be able to make it to the top 50. In that case, they had nothing to lose in risking their 5 million illusion points in the Hall of Causality in exchange for more. Zen didn't want to lose the 1 slot to the Hall of Causality, so he immediately paid 5 million illusion points. This was a chance he didn't want to miss. And so it began. With all the changes that had happened in the illusion battlefield, time seemed to pass by very quickly. Just like that, 6 days had already gone by. During these past 6 days, the intense battle in the illusion battlefield gradually came to an end. Each warrior was accompanied by an invisible hand called Strength. This invisible hand was responsible for distributing the illusion points. When mighty warriors would go ransacking, their illusion points would be driven by strength, and these illusion points would be combined into those of the stronger warriors. The warriors with less illusion points would be deemed penniless and lose their share in the loot. Meanwhile, Zen had just returned from the Hall of Causality through a door of light. In his hand was the saint-killing spear, but this time, it already had a small imprint on it. His second visit to the Hall of Causality was also his second attempt into the Corridor of Emperor. This time, however, Zen did not encounter Supreme Lord Sword, but had faced other true gods instead. And from this recent visit to the Hall of Causality, Zen had gained 40 million illusion points. With the 40 million illusion points he had gained this time, he still hadn't bested the one who was ranked in the first place in this supreme world. He was still ranked second. So who ranked the first? Zen was dying to know who was better than him. But with the hundreds of millions of warriors in this supreme world alone, there was no easy way to find out. I wonder how Lavender will react once she sees the saint-killing spear, Zen thought as he proudly stared at the imprint on the saint-killing spear. The 2 tender sprouts on the spear had grown longer and began to intertwine with each other. Not long after Zen had returned from the Hall of Causality, the mysterious young lady's voice sounded once again. Attention, warriors! The second stage of the illusion battlefield has commenced. All warriors who made it to the top 50 rankings of each supreme world, please move now. All the warriors in the illusion battlefield looked up at the sky when the announcement started. They fell silent and listened carefully. After the announcement, a loud wail of disappointment echoed from afar. It was from a warrior who fell 1 rank short of the top 50. He was desperate to know how far he had gone and how many more illusion points he still needed to progress in the top 50. But even if he found out, it was already too late. Another warrior was celebrating. He had already lost hope when the first stage was about to end. But because of luck, he had killed a warrior and obtained millions of illusion points. And so, at the 11th hour of the first stage, he made it to the top 50. There were 500 warriors in total from the 50 supreme worlds that made it to the second stage of the illusion battlefield competition. Having made it to the second stage, these warriors were now considered as the best in the whole universe. Some of them were innately powerful, while others were merely lucky. Among these qualified warriors, Margaret was probably the happiest, yet the most anxious one. She was happy because she was finally able to leave this supreme world and find Zen somewhere else. She was even closer to him. She was worried that he wouldn't be able to enter the top 50 of a supreme world. That way, she wouldn't even have the chance to see him. Amidst her mixed emotions, a golden door of light appeared before her. Her eyes widened in astonishment, and with a gentle smile on her face, she stepped into the door. The same golden door of light appeared in front of Zen too. This is it. The second stage begins. I can't wait to meet the people behind this door. They must be the strongest warriors in the 50 supreme worlds. They are probably the most outstanding talents in the entire universe, too. Zen thought. With this thought in mind, Zen felt extremely excited for the second stage and entered the door of light. He looked forward to the adventures that would await him in the second stage. Whatever was behind the golden door of light, surprises or dangers or both, he would face them all. Chapter 1302, Shock. Dazzling bright light glittered around Zen as he wandered around the golden space. It was like walking in a glowing, holographic palace. After a long time of traveling in it, he finally saw the end of the space. Zen walked towards the golden door of light, and as soon as he stepped out of it, 3 blood-red castles appeared in front of him. 3 blood-red castles. I got it. Back when Zen had obtained the teleportation token, he had found 3 main cities marked red in that special place. However, those 3 main cities had been inaccessible during that time, and even the teleportation token couldn't bring him to those 3 cities. It turned out that those 3 main cities were the second stage of the illusion battlefield. Buzz. There was a loud but grand howling sound when golden doors behind Zen opened one after another. Then, the martial artists from all throughout the 50 supreme worlds passed through the doors. They all reacted like Zen had the moment they passed through the golden doors of light, which was to look at the 3 huge blood-red castles in front of them curiously. All of them sized each other up after, their eyes filled with a strong sense of vigilance. None of the top 2,500 warriors present were easy to deal with. They represented their own clans, their own forces, and their own races in their quest to strive for the highest glory. A deep, rumbling sound echoed from within the blood-red castles. At that moment, the blood-red castles suddenly began to tremble. The gates of the blood-red castles were 3 gigantic beasts' heads. Each of them was extremely ferocious, like it came out straight from the depths of torture. It crawled on the city gates' grounds as it emitted a dark aura from the savage land. Its 2 huge eyeballs quietly scanned the area in front of it, which made the people who looked at it shake with nervousness. When the beasts opened their mouths, the castle gates were opened as well. The gates are open. Shall we go in? What is this? It's just a statue, yet it's so terrifying. The gates of light opened one by one. The warriors gathered on the plain in front of the blood-red castles and looked at the gates in apprehension. The 2,500 warriors were divided into 3 groups, and each group entered 3 different blood-red castles. There were more than 700 warriors in each group in front of the castles. Some of the warriors were quite decisive and didn't stop at all. After the city gates were opened, they started to walk forward. Many of them were hesitant. After all, they were only a step away from the ultimate battle of the illusion battlefield, so they had to be extremely careful. Suddenly, the mysterious girl's voice echoed throughout the area again. Warriors, please enter the blood-red castles. Upon hearing those words, the originally hesitant martial artists all circulated their life vitality and rose from the ground, then flew towards the city gates. Their hesitations were gone and they seemed to fight each other now. Meanwhile, Zen had already started walking towards a gate when they had first opened. His lips curved into a faint smile when he saw the warriors who had surpassed him plan to seize the initiative in the main city. There was an open passage in front after entering through the big mouth of the beast head. They followed the passage which led to the center of the blood-red castle. In the center was a huge hall, and in the middle of the hall was a pyramid. There were concave caves on top of the pyramid, which measured 10 feet deep and 10 feet high. There were many sculptures displayed inside the caves. It's a sculpture of me. There is also a sculpture of me. Why does this pyramid have a sculpture of everyone? Rankings. I am ranked 170th on the illusion battlefield, and my sculpture is also in the pyramid, ranked 170th. This is everyone's ranking. Once everyone had realized the secret, they all began to observe the sculptures. The warriors could only check their own rankings back then, and they had no idea who in the front and behind them were. Now, everyone could clearly see their rankings in the pyramid. Zen approached the pyramid and his gaze swept over the huge edifice. His eyes landed on the bottom of the pyramid and found Janet's sculpture. 2031st. He smiled a little when he saw her ranking. She had finally made it into the top rankings, and entered the second stage of the illusion battlefield. As Zen looked around, he saw the sculptures of Jeffrey, Haley, and the others. However, he didn't see Coleman's sculpture. Had he failed and been eliminated? After he scanned the bottom row, his eyes slowly moved upwards. Of course, the higher one's ranking was, the higher their position would be. He continued to look at the array of sculptures when he stopped at a certain spot in the pyramid. His gaze froze and his eyes widened. He couldn't believe it. I didn't know he would be here as well, Zen murmured. He jumped up to the 5th floor of the pyramid, where a sculpture of a human martial artist stood before him. This martial artist held a sword in one hand, his face filled with heroic pride and arrogance. Under his sword-like eyebrows were 2 eyes that seemed like stars. He was Rocher, who came from the same great world as Zen. There were over 100,000 supreme worlds in the universe, and numerous Soul Sea Realm warriors who lived in them. However, only 2,500 warriors represented all the supreme worlds. In other words, only one Soul Sea Realm warrior in 4 supreme worlds had entered the 2nd stage of the illusion battlefield. Yet, 2 people from the lower world where Zen was from had made it into the top 2,500. Another smile had made its way to Zen's face. He looked at Rocher's sculpture and noticed that there were a few traces of vicissitudes on it. His aura had become even more mature. But he didn't know where Rocher had ascended to, and which supreme world had he entered to get in the illusion battlefield. If he had entered the top 2,500 rankings, then he might even have the strength of an ace talent. The youth who wielded the sword had actually caught up to him so quickly. When they were in the lower world, Zen had been much ahead of Rocher. At that time, the gap between him and Zen was almost too big to be estimated. Still, Zen never thought that one day, after almost 7 years had passed, that Rocher would be able to catch up. It should be noted that Zen's speed of improvement these years was not to be underestimated. He still had the fairy palace to back him up, which further increased the gap between him and Rocher. However, Rocher was ranked in the 540th place in this pyramid now. It truly surprised Zen. I think Rocher must have met a lucky chance during these years. Otherwise, no matter how strong his talent is, it would have been impossible for him to progress so quickly. It's a pity that he isn't in this blood-red castle. I still have some good wine in my space ring. If I meet him, I'll have to drink 100 pots with him first. Zen muttered. The 2,500 warriors were distributed into 3 groups in the 3 blood-red castles. The warriors who were put in this specific castle were all gathered in this spacious hall. Since Zen couldn't see Rocher at first glance, he must be in another blood-red castle. Zen had been really surprised to see Rocher's sculpture. However, he didn't know that something even more jaw-dropping would come up later on. As Zen climbed up the pyramid, he wanted to carve all the appearances of the people he met into his mind. They would all be his opponents, so he naturally wanted to remember their characteristics. Why are these sculptures here? What's the purpose? He thought. Zen was truly curious about it, but he and everyone else could only guess since the girl in charge of this illusion battlefield didn't give any hints. This is my sculpture, Zen said as he finally found his own sculpture and looked at it. He reached out his hand and touched it, then used his consciousness to immerse himself in the sculpture. However, he still couldn't find anything special about it. After a few more moments, Zen couldn't come up with anything else. Thus, he continued his ascent upwards. Just as he had climbed up to the next floor, which was the top of the pyramid, a sculpture of a woman caught his eye. When he looked closer, he couldn't help but be wide-eyed in shock. When he had seen Rocher's sculpture, he was surprised but also relieved. He knew that it wasn't impossible for Rocher to have reached this stage because of his talent and perseverance. Seeing this woman's sculpture, however, only brought Zen utter shock and disbelief. Chapter 1303, Seeking. Zen's body still felt stiff out of shock, and he reflexively wiped his eyes. He wondered if it was real or if he was just hallucinating. The girl wore an apricot silk robe on top of a brocade dress that was embroidered with flowers, which hugged her beautiful figure perfectly. She emitted a cold and aloof vibe, but she still looked breathtaking. Margaret, she is even ranked 43rd. Is there something wrong? Zen muttered with mixed emotions. He'd never thought that Margaret of all people would participate in the illusion battlefield. Back then, she was even only at the internal elixir realm. Although she possessed the purple power body, she never took a liking to cultivation. She even thought of the process as boring and her greatest enemy. It could even be said that ever since the two of them had met, she had never focused on her cultivation even for a day. However, how could she have survived here? How did she rank in the 43rd place? Was it just because of her purple power body? Zen couldn't find any reason, and just gave up trying to guess. After Zen had been separated from Margaret for a few years, he had naturally missed her. But, the woman he saw at this moment was greatly different from who she used to be. Margaret had become even more elegant and mature in the last few years. She looked extremely charming and confident now. Zen didn't even recognize her at first sight. As Margaret also in either of the other two blood-red castles. The thought of being able to see Margaret soon sent jolts of delight down Zen's body, and his eyes sparkled with anticipation. If they happened to meet again, it would surely be a wonderful encounter. All of this meant that 3 people from the great world Zen came from had managed to rank in the top 500. Was it fate, or just a coincidence? Meanwhile in another blood-red castle, a beautiful lady glanced around alone. Margaret scanned the statues on each floor of the pyramid. The fabric of her clothes fluttered in the wind as she walked, her eyes full of nervousness. There is no Zen statue on this floor. His statue also isn't on this floor. She kept muttering to herself as she hovered in the air, her palms becoming increasingly shaky because of anxiety. At that moment, someone had followed Margaret. It was a warrior dressed in an embroidered robe who also flew up to tail behind her. The warrior looked quite young and appeared to be less than 20 years old, but his eyes looked rather cold. While Margaret observed the statues, the warrior stared at her all the time. The first floor, the second floor, the third floor. Margaret looked around floor by floor, and her disappointment grew. She pouted in annoyance and thought, the higher I go, the less likely I would find Zen. Soon enough, she discovered that someone had been following her. She was already in a bad mood. Her head suddenly whipped around and her enchanting eyes gleamed with a hint of anger. Why are you following me? It turned out that the warrior had followed her all the way. Margaret's unique aura had apparently attracted him from the moment he entered the blood-red castle, and he was about to make friends with her. But when he saw Margaret seem to be seriously looking for something, he didn't try to talk to her. Now that she had suddenly coldly called him out, he was a bit surprised. No one had ever dared to berate him like that, even when he was young. Even the Saint Lords and the World Lords were rather polite and respectful to him. That was because he was a godly genius and had activated a total of 36 petals of the Hinayana lotus flower and the Mahayana lotus flower. He was Nathan Xuanyuan, who had ranked first in the first part of the first stage in the illusion battlefield. Many warriors had already recognized him the moment he entered the blood-red castle. A lot of them deliberately kept a certain distance from him, but there were also some of them who wanted to become friends with the legendary godly genius for the benefits. However, Nathan's attention was solely focused on Margaret. Just as Nathan was stunned, Margaret leapt up once more and her body danced as she stood on the 4th floor of the pyramid. Then she continued her search for Zen's statue. The astonishment on Nathan's face only lasted for an instant before it disappeared without a trace. He looked at Margaret's back and became increasingly interested in her. He followed behind her again and said, "You seem to be looking for something, right? My name is Nathan Xuanyuan, and I can help you." There was a high possibility that Nathan could be one of the several warriors in the entire universe who could go beyond the heavens. After all, he was destined to be the key player in this world of chaos, and would be the strongest among his peers. If it was up to him, he wouldn't have told Margaret his name, but she didn't know him and was also extremely aloof, which made him a bit upset. But when he introduced himself, Margaret should have realized something. She stopped and turned her head to stare back at Nathan, who looked indifferent. He could almost guess what she was going to say next. "You are Nathan Xuanyuan, the legendary godly genius of the thoughtless minds." Nathan had already heard of this kind of words countless times, and he was tired of them. However, to hear it from a beautiful woman was different. He felt pleased. However, Margaret just blinked at him a few times. "Nathan Xuanyuan, who on earth are you? Please don't follow me," she said with a frown. She was so annoyed that she didn't bother being patient to him. After she finished her words, she rushed upwards once more. Margaret never cared about the strongest warriors in the universe, the number of the Supreme Lords and the World Lords, and their relationships with each other. Many warriors often discussed such things among themselves, as if they personally knew those remarkable warriors so well. On the other hand, Margaret wasn't interested in them at all. She only kept practicing martial arts for so many years because of a few words that the old man Nameless had said to her. He told her that if she cultivated, she could surprise Zen and spend much more time accompanying him. She only cared about Zen, and had no interest in Nathan. It also went to say that she didn't care even if he was the most famous talent in the universe. Besides, she didn't know him at all. The other warriors in the pyramid were now focused on Nathan's movements. All of them secretly sniggered when they saw him get ignored by Margaret. Well, it seems that Nathan can also be in such an embarrassing situation. That woman is so full of herself. It's impossible that she hasn't even heard of Nathan. I really admire that girl. It doesn't matter if she really doesn't know him, or if she pretends to. Some foxy women out there pretend to ignore warriors first, before they'd take advantage of them. Those who could enter the second stage of the competition surely have studied about the talents in the universe. More and more hushed whispers and low chatters could be heard. Nathan had even heard some of their comments. He looked a bit displeased and his eyes appeared even colder than it was possible. His left eyebrow twitched in irritation, but he followed Margaret again. He had never failed to do anything in his life. Even his mere existence was a miracle in itself. Even when he had to transcend the heavens and become a true god, he absolutely would not fail. That was the strength of a godly genius. Margaret was strong-willed, and her attitude aroused some kind of primitive desire to conquer her in his heart. Nathan wasn't particularly fond of women. However, he was also a young man and was bound to be infatuated with a woman someday like other men. Right now he was the one attracted to Margaret, even though he couldn't explain why it was the case. After a few more minutes of hovering, Margaret had reached the upper part of the pyramid. Her eyes suddenly lit up with pleasant surprise. He is ranked 77th. I knew it. I've always believed that you would come here. You definitely didn't let me down. She had finally found Zen's statue at the floor she currently stood. Margaret didn't think twice and quickly rushed towards Zen's statue. She reached out and touched the statue's face, her eyes filled with affection. This face had appeared in her dreams countless times in the past 6 years. She'd imagined the moment when she finally met Zen too many times. Now that she had found his statue here, it only meant that he was in another blood-red castle. There seems to be no way to go to another blood-red castle, Margaret thought as her eyes flashed. She had really wanted to fly to Zen's side. However, the rules of the illusion battlefield prevented her from doing such things. Nathan finally caught up to Margaret, who he saw was happily holding and caressing a statue's face. He pulled a long face when he saw that it was a statue of a man with delicate features. He also felt a strong sense of disappointment, and he couldn't help but feel very frustrated. "Who was that?" he asked flatly. He kept an aloof facade in an attempt to restrain his foul mood. Chapter 1304, Rocher's Rise. Margaret didn't bother replying to Nathan, not even perfunctorily. Being so proud and arrogant by nature, Nathan felt rather embarrassed by her indifference, although he wouldn't admit it. As he watched her stare lovingly at the statue, Nathan's curiosity was piqued. He wanted to find out who this person was. Since seeing Zen's statue put Margaret in a generous mood, she exercised some patience with Nathan. "He is someone I like." Her eyes turned gloomy as they remained fixed on the statue. In truth, she wanted to say that Zen was her husband. But because they hadn't had any formal wedding ceremony, they weren't officially married. Most martial artists didn't care about such formalities. However, Margaret thought differently. Initially, she didn't care much for the formalities either, having accepted Letitia's status in Zen's heart. But the circumstances had changed. Letitia might not have ascended yet, but she was here with Zen and she could always stay at his side. Margaret had to rely on her own efforts to get Zen to make her his wife. Such thoughts ran through Margaret's mind. If anyone else knew what was running through the mind of her, a warrior who ranked in the top 50 of the illusion battlefield, their jaws would drop to the ground. In the meantime, Nathan was growing more and more curious about the statue Margaret was fixated on. "Miss, what is this person's name?" In spite of his intentions to befriend Margaret, he didn't even know her name yet. Instead of finding that out first, he asked for the name of the man's statue, even he found his actions strange. With a cold look, she offered an answer, "His name is Zen Luo." The name made Nathan's eyes light up. It was actually Zen Luo, who ranked 77th. Never did Nathan think the statue would be of Zen Luo, someone with quite a reputation across the universe. Nathan didn't know much about Zen and he didn't want to. In Nathan's world, among the young generation, only the few godly geniuses were qualified to be his opponents. Even some powerful ace talents were no match for him. As for Zen, this guy had been talking incessantly in his ear. Even if he didn't want anything to do with him, he couldn't avoid the roaring token's sound. Never did he imagine that this guy would enter the top 100 as well. At 77th place, though, his rank wasn't something particularly special. The few people like Lawson and some other godly geniuses were qualified to face Nathan, so to him, all the others were nothing. So he is Zen Luo. Nathan's expression came up indifferent. The haughtiness in his heart instantly surfaced once again. How could Margaret not recognize the hint of disdain in Nathan's tone? Still, she ignored him and continued examining Zen's statue. Meanwhile, in another blood-red castle, a handsome young man walked briskly around the pyramid. Every time he passed a statue, his brows raised slightly, he would carefully examine and take note of every statue's features, analyze their temperament and age. This young man was none other than Rocher. Back then, after Zen ascended to the upper world, as a hero who had contributed to the suppression of the revolt, Rocher was then highly valued by the Cloud Hall. But with Rocher's vision and talent, he wasn't destined to be stuck in the Cloud Hall or Central region. The path of martial arts was limitless and there would always be stronger warriors. Many martial artists managed to achieve a certain degree of success before settling down and continuing to live a stable life. But Rocher was remarkably ambitious. In this aspect, he was much like Zen, he craved for something higher. Standing at a higher place, he didn't care for looking down on all living things, but instead, he wanted to seek and explore the origin and truth of the world. After the Cloud Hall stabilized, Rocher chose to go out and cultivate. In the past 6 years, he had passed through the chaotic ocean of stars, the 4 divine kingdoms, finally arriving at the northernmost region of the Divine Kingdom continent, the largest savage land. Here, Rocher had gone through life and death situations, all to gain experience. Along his path, he encountered several unique species, the ancient wild beasts with strength comparable to that of the Soul Sea Realm warriors. After everything, he discovered a huge secret on the savage land. Even when Zen had merged with the world's will, he hadn't been able to find this secret among the vast memories. This secret didn't belong to this great world, after all. The memories of the world's will covered only the matters within this plane. And with that, Rocher found quite a fortune. This blessing caused his strength to increase dramatically. He didn't even have time to return to the central region before the great world produced a powerful force of expulsion, forcing him to ascend to the upper world. Where he reached the upper world was completely different from where Zen or Letitia did. Rocher had ascended to a supreme world that belonged to the thoughtless minds. 2 years after ascending to the upper world, he had been highly valued by some sacred place, allowing him to enter the core house of the sacred place. Before getting the chance to display his strength and talent, the illusion battlefield was already opened. When it was, the martial artists of the 10th grade sacred place had advised Rocher to be prepared before entering the illusion battlefield. But Rocher stepped into the battlefield without so much as a blink. And here, Rocher's ranking skyrocketed. His name rose from the top 10 million to the top 1 million, to 100,000. The martial artists from the sacred place that Rocher had joined, including the Saint Lord of the sacred place, were all stunned by his performance. While the sacred place did have some powerful talents, in the end, they only ranked around 120,000th. But this unknown sword cultivator suddenly charged up into the top 100,000. How could they not give him their attention? But Rocher didn't just stop there. He quickly entered the top 90,000. 80,000. 70,000. Compared to Zen, Rocher didn't have a strong desire to get illusion points. His motivation to participate was different from Zen's. He wanted to see just how powerful these talents of the supreme worlds were. At the last moment, after Rocher returned from the Hall of Causality, his illusion points increased rapidly, pulling his ranking up to the 2000th, bringing him right into the second stage of the illusion battlefield. This made Rocher's original sacred place cheer with joy. And so Rocher's glory was also that of the 10th grade sacred place he belonged to. Top 2, 500. This was an unimaginable feat, something could only be achieved by either an ace talent or someone only second to that. For an ordinary 10th grade sacred place, it simply didn't have the ability to nurture an ace talent. It made perfect sense that Rocher's outstanding achievement brought about such shock. When his name was first reported to the Saint Lord of the sacred place, the Saint Lord was left dumbfounded. He was simply unaware that his sacred place had such a talent. Carrying a sword on his back, Rocher climbed up the pyramid, his gaze faintly sweeping over the statues. I found him, Zen, 77th. There wasn't the slightest trace of surprise in Rocher's eyes upon locating Zen's rank. Naturally, Rocher was aware of Zen's deeds in the past 2 years. He had even heard stories from Zen in the universe, some of which he was quite familiar with. From his point of view, Zen was bound to enter the second stage. What would be truly shocking was if he didn't reach it. After seeing Zen's statue, the light in Rocher's eyes glistened even more brightly. The sword he carried on his back trembled slightly. He was excited. Aware that he was falling behind, he knew he had to strive harder to catch up. Since the beginning, Rocher had poured his best efforts into catching up with Zen. Even though he was still far behind Zen, Rocher wasn't discouraged in the slightest. In his entire life, he had one goal. If he lost, he would persevere. Whether or not he could achieve the goal in the end didn't really matter to him, he valued the process. But in the end, he still managed to achieve the goal that seemed so impossible in the beginning. After being left far behind by Zen, he finally caught up to him. He just couldn't gauge the gap between his and Zen's strength. "Don't worry, we'll meet each other in the end," Rocher thought as he reached out a hand to press down the sword hanging on his back until it stopped trembling obediently. He and Zen were just as much friends as they were rivals. With that, Rocher gave a nod toward Zen's statue and went on, continuing to climb up the pyramid. But just as he took a few steps forward, he came to another halt. Suddenly, his expression froze. Just like Zen, he stopped before Margaret's statue in surprise, though his shock wasn't as hefty as Zen's. "I didn't expect her to reach such a ranking," he said flatly as he gazed upon the statue. Thinking about her relationship with Zen, the corners of his lips curled up into a smile. He wondered what kind of expression Zen would wear if he met Margaret. Soon, a voice rang out across the three blood-red castles. "Everyone, please stand in front of your statues." This mysterious young girl called the shots in this illusion battlefield. When her voice resounded, no one dared disobey. Chapter 1305, Laughter. Everyone climbed up the pyramid and stood in front of their own statues. The moment Zen arrived in front of his, the statue's eyes shone with a bright light that streamed directly into his eyes. The moment the light hit his eyes, Zen felt as if he formed an instant connection with the statue, as if it had become his clone. "This is so strange," he murmured to himself. It wasn't just him. The other warriors also revealed puzzled looks as they looked into the eyes of their statues. They felt as if there was another copy of themselves somewhere in this universe and they were inherently connected to this supposed clone. As they all tried to get used to this feeling, the mysterious girl's voice rang out. "These statues represent your lives. If one statue is destroyed, then one will be eliminated at once." The sound of the girl's voice startled Zen a bit, but her words shed some clarity for the next challenge. "It looks like we'll have to protect our own statues for the second stage. From now on, these statues will serve as your clones. They will all be under your control. You may also refine them on the second floor of the blood-red castle." The mysterious girl continued to explain, laying out all the castle's rules to everyone present. It took her a few minutes to list down all the pertinent information to the warriors. "I've told you all the rules. Now all you'll have to do is to avoid elimination. The countdown will be starting shortly. Once the timer runs out, prepare for a fierce attack." A bright circle of light appeared at the top of the blood-red hall as soon as the girl finished speaking. Everyone immediately understood that this circle of light was their timer. The fierce attack would be launched the moment it disappeared. Zen shot a look at his statue and it immediately raised its hands and walked up to him. It acted accordingly to whatever Zen willed it to do. The statue was now lifelike and looked exactly like Zen. The young man had no idea what material this clone of his was made of. It seemed to be made of stone, but its body was flexible and its movements were fluid enough. The only thing that differentiated it from Zen was the small purple star painted in its chest. Whoosh! Boom! There was a loud explosion as a statue on top of the pyramid jumped down to the floor Zen was at. "Oops! This statue is so fragile. Will it break after jumping that height?" An ogre warrior muttered as he jumped down to retrieve his clone statue. He was extremely tall and bulky, and so was his statue. The clone that jumped down from the top of the pyramid now sported numerous cracks on its legs and chest. The height was no more than 80 feet, but it already looked as if it was about to fall into pieces. There was no doubt about it. They might look extremely like living people, but these statues were still very fragile. Their hardness was the same as any other ordinary statue. A warrior at the nature level could probably smash it with a single punch. As the ogre jumped from the top of the pyramid, that meant he was ranked above Zen and was at least an ace talent. Zen couldn't help but sigh. Here was a mighty and powerful warrior who was too careless and broke his own statue before the attack even started. The ogre didn't really seem to care. Instead, he continued to control his statue and made it jump its way down the pyramid. Zen couldn't take that risk. He willed his own statue to walk towards him. Afterwards, he lifted it up to his shoulder and flew to the center of the hall. He landed perfectly and put the statue down carefully, afraid that he might break it if he was too rough in handling it. This statue was a little too heavy for an ordinary person to lift, but that wasn't the case for a mighty Soul Sea Realm warrior. All Zen needed to do was to flick the statue with a finger and it would easily shatter into pieces. Zen wasn't worried that the other warriors would attack him or his statue. The mysterious girl had made it clear that fighting with each other was prohibited and so was harming another person's statue. Any disobedience would result in a swift elimination. What they needed to watch out for were the fierce waves of attacks that would come once the timer ran out. By then, securing their own statues would be everyone's first priority. Zen walked to one side of the hall and ordered his statue to follow. The blood-red castle was divided into 3 floors which were accessed by a staircase at the side of each one. Zen climbed up and soon arrived at the 2nd floor. Here he found a couple of bundles of multicolored bamboo slips that emitted a faint glow as they floated in the air. According to that mysterious girl, these bamboo slips can be used to strengthen my statue, though I would have to spend a couple of my illusion points doing that. He murmured as he let his consciousness fade away from his body and enter a bundle of red bamboo slips. Zen soon got a message that these bamboo slips were for power. He could offer either 100,000 illusion points or original law crystals in exchange for these bamboo slips in order to increase his statue's power. This bundle of slips was pretty much useless since the statue wasn't necessarily going to fight anyone. It was too fragile and its defenses were too weak. It would end up shattering before it even got the chance to attack. Zen then left the bundle of red bamboo slips and chose a cyan one. The defense bamboo slips can directly intensify the defensive power of the statue. The description of the cyan bamboo slips made Zen's eyes gleam with excitement. He knew he was strong and powerful, so he knew he could defend his statue, but it was highly possible for it to take some damage from the fights that were soon to follow. Right now, the statue was so fragile that a level 1 beast could smash it into pieces. Zen knew that there was a need to increase its defense as soon as possible. Zen glanced at the circle of light on top of the castle's hall to check how much time he had left. The light had only diminished to a quarter of its size, so he more or less had half an hour left. He then made a decision and poured his consciousness into the other bamboo slips. Many warriors had also noticed the bundle of cyan bamboo slips. They also knew that defense was their utmost priority since they had to make sure that their statues remained intact during the oncoming siege. A few warriors decided to check out the other bamboo slips while the more decisive ones chose to immediately exchange their points for the cyan one. 100,000 illusion points were a reasonable enough price to intensify a statue's defense. Exchange all my illusion points for the defense bamboo slips, a night group warrior said. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Numerous illusion points began to burst out from the warrior and poured into the cyan bamboo slips. As the exchange was made, multiple rays of cyan light also covered his statue. The rays of light coalesced and coated the statue as its defense increased significantly. Those in the top 2,500 had no shortage of illusion points. The person with the least points had more than 40 million. So the amount of points this night group warrior exchanged was enough to intensify his statue's defense hundreds of times. The light shone for quite a long time before finally dimming to reveal a statue that glowed faintly of cyan light. From being extremely fragile, it now looked as hard as a diamond that even a soul serene warrior would have trouble smashing it to pieces. The night group warrior smiled, satisfied with his decision. Of course, the other warriors weren't willing to be left behind. They too exchanged all their illusion points for the cyan bamboo slips. Zen noticed this and turned his attention back at the bundles of bamboo slips in front of him. The power contained within these slips was that of pure, precious original laws. The life bamboo slips could increase a statue's life power, the flame bamboo slips could grant it the power of flames, and so on. Each bundle of slips could be exchanged for 100,000 illusion points. Zen's eyes landed on a bundle of golden bamboo slips. He poured his consciousness into these slips and heard the laughter of the mysterious girl. Chapter 1306, Exchange. The sudden laughter made Zen a bit uncomfortable. When they were in the outside world, Zen had interacted with her quite frequently. Though they had never personally met, he remembered her as a rather lively girl. But after entering the illusion battlefield, she meticulously read the rules of the battlefield, growing more and more cold and detached. Your performance was not bad, Zen. You've already ranked 77th. The girl's voice echoed from within Zen's mind. After a stunned moment, he asked, is there any news of Yan? Quote. For a moment, the other was silent until a dissatisfied voice called out, why is this the first thing you say to me every time? The comment made Zen roll his eyes. Isn't this nonsense? Though he could use his roaring token limitlessly, he had something else more important to do than telling her stories. Wasn't it all for getting her to help him investigate Yan's whereabouts, after all? No news, Zen still asked. As indifferent as ever, the girl replied, the divine land is much larger than you can imagine. I sent back the news a few years ago, but I haven't heard from them yet. Helpless, the mysterious girl could only explain this to Zen. A look of disappointment surfaced on Zen's face. With a sigh, he asked, "What are you doing? Why did you suddenly appear?" Originally, he wanted to examine the bamboo slips, just when the mysterious girl's consciousness suddenly popped up. "Nothing. I'm personally presiding over the illusion battlefield. Aren't you going to ask for my help?" She asked him with a knowing smile. "No need," Zen immediately declined. While Zen wasn't very clear on the true meaning behind the illusion battlefield, he knew that this was the place where the talents of the Soul Sea realm competed. Since he had entered the battlefield prepared to rely on his own strength, he didn't rely on the Cyan Dragon nor did he rely on Lavender. So why would he need anyone else's help? Eventually, he knew he had to face those ace talents and the godly geniuses. Those like Lucille after the fusion, or Lone, perhaps. But when a martial artist was born, he could only rely on himself in the end. One might be able to show off his strength with others' help, but that was still only others' help. "Don't be like this. I can truly help you," the mysterious girl continued. "I said there's no need," Zen said with a frown. "I only need you to find Yan's location. That alone is enough." Suddenly, the other side fell silent. In the center of these three blood-red castles, deep in the skies above, there floated a ring-shaped cloud. Deep within the cloud was a palace that seemed to be carved from crystal. At the side of the palace, a young girl was sitting on the railing. This young girl wore a light blue blouse along with a green pleated dress, flower patterns scattered all over it. Her long and plump legs hung down along the railing in the clouds. From the back, the small shoulders seemed to be cut out just as she looked unmistakably lonely. She was, of course, the host of the illusion battlefield, the mysterious girl who had been listening to Zen's stories. At this moment, her cheeks were puffed up just as her face was filled with indignation. "I've never seen such a person. Didn't you know of my good intentions? Humph, I don't care if you live or die." Ever since Zen entered the illusion battlefield, the mysterious girl's gaze fell upon Zen for the first time. Her gaze seemed to follow him from the start to finish, from one main city to the other, and all the way to the Hall of Causality. At this stage, she still had much trust in Zen's strength. In spite of her paying close attention, she didn't help. After reaching the second stage, she decided to take the initiative and help Zen. At any rate, he should still be considered her friend. Though she chatted with Zen for many years, using the roaring token, she didn't actually know his personality that well. It wasn't that he tended to be pedantic, he didn't pursue absolute fairness. After all, this world would never have been fair from birth. Talent, luck, background. There were too many factors affecting one's fate. A completely fair world simply did not exist. But Zen knew that the illusion battlefield was also a review of Zen himself. This opportunity only happened once every grand era. He didn't want to miss the opportunity, and he also didn't want to use cheating to obtain his property. The young girl frowned as her beautiful eyes moved, then a mischievous smile appeared on her face. "You don't need me to help you. Humph, I won't let anybody refuse me. No one can dare disobey me." For almost 6 grand eras, she had been in charge of this universe. 1 grand era was 3.6 billion years, 6 grand eras were 21.6 billion years. To her race, longevity was pretty much an eternal existence. In the river of time, she often sealed herself. 100 million years was nothing but the flick of her finger. Time flowed faster, or rather, it leapt within her consciousness. Such was the instinct of her race. The young girl had passed several grand years just as such. In this grand era, the boredom finally took over when she woke up in the heavens. Singing was good for boredom. She later found that her singing almost had the entire universe screwed. Finally, when the group of Supreme Lords begged her, she stopped the melodies. Though she wanted to use the roaring token to chat, the Supreme Lords held their roaring tokens extra tightly, they were afraid they would waste even a single one. In truth, she had secretly made known the method to make the roaring token. Otherwise, though the universe was wide and there were many creatures to live in it, it would still be too quiet for her who was trapped in the heavens. Afterward, the number of roaring tokens increased and the universe turned more and more lively. But no one was willing to respond to her. She was still utterly bored. Right until Zen appeared. The moment he was in sight, this guy attracted her attention. He seemed to be looking for a girl named Yan, but even after shouting all over the universe through the roaring token, he got no response. In spite of this, he began arguing with 2 Supreme Lords. Then, he began to count. At the time, this mysterious girl thought that Zen was quite an interesting guy. She was also curious about where Zen got so many roaring tokens. Or did this mean that he had a roaring token that could be used for limitless times just as she did? Still, she had no interest in investigating how Zen's roaring token had come about. So long as the guy was willing to talk to her, she would be satisfied. Afterward, she listened to Zen tell stories one after another after she promised to help him find his sister. These few years, she no longer fell into deep sleep, or rather, she refused to let herself fall into one. With this, her sleeping time was cut down to less than a year or half a year instead of the millions or even hundreds of millions of years before. Now that she had made her decision, she slowly raised her right hand until a purple halo appeared around her thin arm. The instant it appeared, it silently spread out. Without being noticed, it silently enveloped the entire illusion battlefield. Zen had no clue what this mysterious girl was planning. When her voice faded away, he released a breath of relief. Once again, he examined the bundle of golden bamboo slips and realized that this was used to imprint the heavens law onto the sculpture. But this heavens law required 500 million illusion points in order to exchange for it. The news left Zen feeling dizzy. Even if it was the first-ranked warrior of the illusion battlefield, he couldn't possibly have obtained 500 million illusion points, could he? So Zen turned around and selected the bamboo slips of power, defense, and speed. Someone had concentrated all his illusion points into one kind of slips, but Zen was still doing what he could to achieve balance. What Zen didn't know, though, was that he had already been manipulated by the mysterious girl during the exchange. The amount of illusion points he exchanged was different from that of the others. Chapter 1307, The Purple Stars. The illusion points that they had gathered on the second stage no longer determined their rankings in the illusion battlefield. Now, the elimination process had begun. If one's statue was destroyed, he or she would be eliminated straight away. Therefore, all the warriors would invest their illusion points into their statues in order to strengthen them before the end of the prescribed time. They would have to spend 100,000 illusion points strengthen their statues once, and even that wouldn't be enough. No matter how strong their statues could become, it was obviously impossible to expect the statues to fight. They all knew very well that they would have to rely on their own prowess and skills in the upcoming battle. So the warriors used their illusion points to enhance the defense of the statues. This was deemed to be the safest method. After all, the top 500 warriors had absolute confidence in their own strength. The statues were made from some unknown stone. As long as they didn't break, their owners would not face elimination. A purple star had been engraved on the chest of every statue. As the statues gained strength, the number of the stars would increase. When the warriors intensified their statues for 100 times, it meant they had consumed 50 million illusion points, and a second purple star would appear on the chests of their statues. Most warriors had got over 50 million illusion points, and only those who were not above the 2000th rank had a slightly lower number of illusion points. Thus, after they had used up all the illusion points that they had been accumulating, a second purple star would appear. While they were strengthening their statues, a warrior clad in heavy armor brought his statue to the second floor. He had a square face and was kitted in extravagant equipment. In his left hand was an enormous shield, which was as tall as a man, while in his right hand he wielded a heavy silver sword. There was a wild look in his eyes, and his face looked as if it was carved out of stone. The statue behind him also held a similar shield and a sword. Zen was engrossed in methodically strengthening his statue when he saw a white light flash from the corner of his eye. He turned to glance at the newcomer and his eyebrows went up imperceptibly. The newcomer was ranked 7th in the pyramid. Studying his heavy equipment, Zen was somewhat impressed by him. However, he didn't know which force this man belonged to. When the man arrived, all the warriors began to whisper among themselves. "Look, it's Carl Jong from the celestial position. It's said that he's a lunatic. Be that as it may, don't underestimate him. He's a godly genius of the celestial position." When Zen heard these words, his heart skipped a beat. So this mysterious man was a godly genius. Now, Zen had already known that the godly genius was a martial artist whose Mahayana lotus flower was in full bloom. However, the newcomer had a strange expression on his face. Zen wondered which godly way he might have trained. "Carl Jr., await orders here," he ordered. He used the heavy sword in his hand to point at a place. Following his command, his statue went and took his position, by kneeling down on one knee, bowing to his master. Seeing this scene, Zen was stunned. Warriors' statues were supposed to be their clones. Carl had just ordered his clone to kowtow to him. Was he really as crazy as people said? If so, how could a madman become a godly genius? Carl started browsing through the bamboo slips along with the others. He decided to choose to improve his statue's strength, so he exchanged all his illusion points for strength bamboo slips. As soon as he did that, rays of red light engulfed his statue. Every time the red light flashed, it meant that his statue had been strengthened. From the looks of it, he was preparing to only improve his statue's strength. Everyone stared at him as though he was an idiot. The statue was as fragile as a clay doll, and a single touch would shatter it. What was the point of improving its strength? If he were to use his statue's punch, it would probably be smashed to smithereens. Didn't he intend to pass the second stage? I've long heard that Carl Jong from the celestial position is a strange guy. I finally met him today and it's true, he's no different than an idiot. A martial artist ridiculed. Carl was staring at his statue in rapt attention. After hearing these words, he suddenly turned around and said to the martial artist, talking about others behind their backs is extremely immoral. Then he aimed the blade of his heavy sword towards the speaker, the shiny sword reflecting his face. He continued, I have kept your face in my mind. I can't punish you here, but if we meet in the outside world, I definitely won't let you go. He spoke seriously with an eerie expression. He wasn't joking at all. He would definitely do what he said. Hearing this, the warrior trembled in fear. No matter how stupid the others thought Carl was, he still was a godly genius of the celestial position. Furthermore, it was rumored that he never joked around and was always true to his word. Carl finished speaking and no longer paid attention to the warrior. He turned back to his statue and resumed spending more illusion points improving his statue's strength. Not long after, a purple light flashed, and a second purple star appeared on the chest of his statue. This meant that he had invested over 50 million illusion points. However, he did not plan to stop here. He continued strengthening his statue even more. Before long, a purple light once again flickered on the chest of his statue to everyone's surprise. He actually gained a third purple star. How could he get a third purple star? This means he has more than 100 million illusion points. That's how a third purple star appeared. This fool has spent so many illusion points improving his statue's strength. What a waste. No one knew how many illusion points were required to strengthen the statue layer by layer, so they could only do a rough estimate. But everyone knew that the purple stars on the statue showed the extent to which it had strengthened. Seeing the third purple star, they sighed in their hearts and shook their heads. Carl had so many illusion points, but he had wasted them improving only his statue's strength. There were two ways to reasonably strengthen the statue. One was to enhance its defense only, and the other was to enhance both, its defense as well as its strength, which was what Zen was doing. He didn't see any point in enhancing just its strength. But nobody informed Carl about this. Even if they did, he wouldn't listen. Zen's game plan was very clear. After strengthening his statue with the speed bamboo slips, he began to strengthen it using the strength bamboo slips and the defense bamboo slips. However, just then, something strange occurred. Not long after he began, a purple light flashed on the chest of his own statue, and a second purple star appeared. According to everyone's calculations, the second star would cost 50 million illusion points, but Zen had consumed less than 8 million. So how could he have obtained the second purple star already? At this time, not everyone was paying attention to Carl. Everyone knew that Carl had won the 7th place in the illusion battlefield, which was quite a high rank, but it was unclear how many illusion points he had accumulated. Going by what was unfolding before them, they could make a rough estimate. Carl was still determinedly making his statue stronger and stronger. The other warriors held their breath as they stared at the scene in front of them. Not long after, a fourth purple star appeared. That meant Carl had at least 200 million illusion points in his kitty. The top 500 warriors were a proud bunch. Since they had risen to the top 500, they believed that the disparity between them and the powerhouses before them wasn't too great. However, Carl, who had over 200 million illusion points, was only ranked number 7. If that was the case, then how many illusion points did the warrior at the 6th place obtain? How about the one at the 5th place? And what about those in the top 4? At this thought, they all looked shattered as they realized how much of a difference there was between themselves and the ace talents and godly geniuses before them. Their collective gasp attracted Zen's gaze. Does this guy really have 200 million illusion points? Zen's pupils contracted slightly. Well, I know why, he thought to himself. In the supreme world, he had obtained nearly 100 million illusion points, yet he was still unable to get to the 1st place. Obviously, the number 1 warrior possessed a lot of illusion points. The warriors on top of the list were incomparably strong, and the disparity between them was like a yawning chasm. A long time passed when Carl finally stopped strengthening his statue. The other warriors guessed that the number of his illusion points must be between 230 million and 240 million. It was less than 250 million, otherwise, he would have been able to get the 5th purple star. Zen had also sped up his strengthening process now. He was confused. The 2nd purple star appeared very early, so he thought his even distribution had a bigger impact on the statue's strength level. However, after he injected 20 million illusion points, a purple light flashed and the 3rd purple star appeared. Chapter 1308. Carve out a path. It wasn't strange for Zen to activate 2 purple stars. Most people would be able to activate their 2nd purple star after consuming all of their illusion points. But not everyone could make the 3rd purple star appear. In fact, only the top 20 warriors of the illusion battlefield had enough illusion points to activate this 3rd purple star. Taking that into consideration, there were only around 7 or 8 warriors that could activate it in this blood-red castle. Look, that brat has activated the 3rd purple star. A warrior remarked after noticing the statue beside Zen. All eyes were immediately on him when they heard what the warrior said. There were quite a few gasps of surprise once they noticed that there was indeed a 3rd purple star on Zen's statue. This guy, isn't he only around 70th in the rankings? He's 77th to be more exact. That can't be right. His ranking is even below mine. He definitely has less illusion points than me, but why can't I activate my 3rd purple star? These martial artists had keen observations and had remembered clearly each other's rankings. The rankings were all based on the number of illusion points one had. All of them were aware and understood how the system worked. There were a lot of warriors that were ranked higher than Zen, but they weren't able to activate their 3rd purple star. How was Zen able to do it then? Unfortunately, not even Zen would be able to answer their questions. Because even he, himself, had no idea how he did it. Regardless, he did not really care what others thought. Zen remained unbothered as he continued injecting illusion points into the bamboo slips to strengthen his statue. He had poured in a little over 40 million illusion points before the purple light flared up once again. Buzz! A 4th purple star made its appearance on the statue's chest. There's a 4th one. No way. How did he do it? He hasn't seemed to have injected that much illusion points. Carl also cast his gaze over at Zen's statue. In fact, almost everyone was currently looking at Zen. Is he cheating? Cheating in the illusion battlefield? Are you kidding? Well, if he didn't cheat, then how was he able to make a 4th purple star appear? Before they could even finish their words, another purple star appeared on Zen's statue. 5 purple stars. In conventional conditions, condensing a 5th purple star would require roughly 250 million illusion points. Not even the godly genius of the celestial position, who was ranked 7th, could achieve such a feat. How in the world was Zen able to do it? Everyone stared at the young man in combined awe and intrigue. None of them really knew what to say at this point. There won't be a 6th. But before they could even finish their words, another purple light flashed and a 6th purple star appeared. Zen remained expressionless as he stared at the 6th purple star that appeared on his statue. He had a rough guess as to what was causing all this, and it involved a certain mysterious girl. This girl is too willful, he murmured to himself, but knew he had no choice in the matter. He couldn't just throw his hard-earned illusion points to waste after all. The more illusion points he injected into his statue, the more purple stars appeared. The 7th purple star, the 8th purple star, the 9th purple star. Zen now had 10 purple stars after consuming all of his illusion points. By then, a vigorous aura emanated from his statue. This aura was even a little stronger than Zen's. Every time a purple star appeared, the astonishment in everyone's eyes increased. At this moment, the entire hall was silent, not really knowing what to make of this ridiculous yet also amazing occurrence. Zen, on the other hand, looked terribly pleased with his creation. He raised his head to look at the circle of light on top of the castle and found that it had already disappeared by 90%. Their time was about to run out and they should all get ready for the siege. With this in mind, Zen quickly manipulated his statue to take their leave. A warrior blocked his way. How did you do it? He asked. Zen merely shrugged. I don't know. He left with his ridiculously overpowered statue in tow. The moment he disappeared, the hall was abuzz with discussion. Who was that guy? He can't be a nobody considering he is in the 77th place. His looks are new to me though. Enough about him. Our time is almost up. We all need to prepare. Zen and his statue arrived at the platform by the blood-red castle's entrance. From there, he could make out the distant plains that lay before them. According to the mysterious girl, they would face an endless onslaught of beasts for this round. The statues would be the first target and the warriors second. It was fine if the warrior died since they could be revived, but if their statues were destroyed then they would automatically be eliminated. Once all of them made the necessary augmentations to their statues, the warriors then began to choose their spots. A few climbed on top of the castle while others utilized hard-to-find corners. Most, however, chose to scatter within the castle walls. The circle's light inevitably disappeared, signaling the start of the siege. The instant it dissipated, a blood-red light abruptly spread out across the land. Huff! Zen stood together with his statue and saw a black mist rise up from the endless plain all the way towards the blood-red castle's entrance. Cluck, cluck, cluck. The sound of the approaching beasts could be heard even from afar. A cyan film of light appeared over Zen's eyes and a grim expression flashed on his face. Pangolins, he murmured as a horde of black pangolins came into view. These animals were roughly the size of an adult wolf and each one of them had a pair of extremely sharp wings. However, despite being winged creatures, these pangolins mostly relied on their thick legs to run wildly on the ground. Yes, these nether pangolins grew up in the darkest of places. They have a drum-like stomach that hides an explosive bladder. A pangolin's death would entail a violent explosion of its entrails. This is the first wave. As these formidable nether pangolins approached, Zen's body fired up with an intense will to fight. Regardless of whether or not that mysterious girl did something to strengthen his statue, he must still do his best to pass this test. Cluck, cluck, cluck. The clamor was getting closer as the nether pangolins made their way into the castle. The warriors were also getting fired up, sporting serious faces as they prepared to face their first wave. It was very clear to everyone that the first stage of the illusion battlefield was to filter out the best from the trillions of Soul Sea Realm warriors. The second stage was different and perhaps the most crucial phase. They would have to prove their strength in the presence of other elite warriors in order not to be wiped out. They're coming. The sky and the earth went dark as the oncoming nether pangolins covered the entire landscape. They arrived quickly at the castle gates and swarmed into the castles. Cluck, cluck, cluck. The majority of the horde headed straight for the castles. A few, however, noticed Zen on the platform and quickly took this chance to charge at him. Or, perhaps it was more accurate that they were rushing towards his statue. Go die, Zen roared without the slightest hesitation. He quickly slashed at these pesky pangolins with his Thunderwind Divine Sword and let the wind blades do their work. Shoo, shoo, shoo. The wind blades formed a protective circular ring around Zen and his statue, insulating them from the nether pangolins that were rushing to take their heads. The first nether pangolin that was sliced by the wind blades immediately exploded, generating a powerful impact. Bam! As it exploded, its spikes also shot out and flew towards Zen like secret projectiles. Zen had been a bit worried at first, not really sure if the reinforcements on his statue would really work. However, he breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the spikes hit his statue yet not leave any trace on it. It seemed the 10 purple stars on his statue were not just for show. With this fact in mind, Zen controlled his statue, ordering it to rush out of the wind blade's protection and crush these nether pangolins. It was relatively easy for Zen as he watched his statue clear a path from the castle's entrance all the way to the main hall without even lifting a finger. The amount of nether pangolins was no joke as they quickly occupied the entire castle like a sudden tidal wave. All the martial artists were busy protecting their statues, choosing to endure the impact of a pangolin's explosion rather than let their precious statues suffer any damage. An unlucky warrior had accidentally driven himself to a corner and had his statue surrounded by dozens of nether pangolins. A chain explosion caused his statue to be blown into pieces, thus eliminating him from the battlefield. Carl, on the other hand, was flourishing. His statue was still fragile since he used all of his illusion points to reinforce its strength only. However, it was currently protected by a translucent shield of light. This light was Carl's sacred shield of the heart. It was a skill he comprehended wherein as long as his mind and heart lived, then his shield would never be broken. With the sacred shield of the heart protecting his statue, he could focus on brandishing the gigantic sword in his hand to slash at the nether pangolins that constantly came at him. With everyone busy protecting their own statues, the sight of Zen's statue rendered them all speechless. Zen hadn't taken any special measures to protect his statue, in fact, it was the opposite. He was using his statue to fight the nether pangolins and carve out a path for him to get through. Chapter 1309, Onlooker. This statue seemed to have been highly reinforced and as a result had become impregnable. Zen also felt surprised upon discovering this about the effigy. Challenges in the blood-red castle might be a process of elimination, but the mysterious girl had helped him immediately strengthen the statue, making it utterly indestructible. Given the hardness of the statue, it would prove difficult even for Zen to destroy it. This left Zen feeling morose and bored. During this process of elimination, he seemed to have nothing to do. Wave after wave of beasts rushed into the blood-red castle like floodwaters, ready to overcome the warriors. In the beginning, there were a large number of nether pangolins, and now countless wind dragons had also turned to the attack. Zen's statue stood like an impregnable boulder, in the middle of the castle hall, and the beasts dashed themselves to pieces on its unassailable surface. As for the other warriors, some were crushed by the vicious beasts or forced to run for their lives, and some could only try their best to hang on. In the end, even Karl could not hold out. After all, the vicious beasts became increasingly stronger. Although the sacred shield Karl had condensed was incomparably sturdy, it was also exhausting his will. Zen sliced open the head of a wind dragon with a single slash, but his face was filled with boredom. The first target of these wind dragons was the statues, and they wouldn't even dodge Zen's attack. Zen would probably even be able to pass the first round of the competition easily without even striking a blowing. He'd already resigned himself to becoming merely an onlooker. This is unnecessary. Zen curled his lips down as a disappointed look appeared on his face. Although he knew that the mysterious girl had intended to help him with her kindness, it had also made him lose any chance of challenging these beasts. Lowering his head to look at his space ring, he stretched out his hand and gently pressed down, making a selection. Accompanied by a flash of light, the teleportation token appeared in his hand. Since Zen's statue was extremely hard, he could pass the first round of the elimination match without even taking any action. With a flash of light, Zen was teleported into the strange space. At this moment, the main cities marked in this space had almost completely disappeared, leaving only the three main red cities in the center. These were the three blood-red castles. Without much consideration, Zen randomly chose one of the main cities and sank down to it. Right now, the three blood-red castles were undergoing massive attacks from various beasts, and the warriors were constantly being eliminated as they were trampled, disemboweled, and ravaged by the savage beasts. Of the 500 warriors, more than 1,000 of them were kicked out of this place and eliminated the moment that their statues were destroyed by the vicious beasts. Although they were unwilling to leave, this was the rule of the illusion battlefield and they had to be eliminated if they couldn't withstand the beast attacks. Bam! Accompanied by a burst of white light, Zen appeared near the top of the hall of the blood-red castle and heavily crashed down in a shower of dust and debris. When the warriors, who were all engaged with fighting the vicious beasts, saw him, they were startled. What had just happened? Why was there another guy entering the challenge, at this time? In the hall of this blood-red castle, 7 flying swords of different colors floated protectively around Margaret. These 7 flying swords were legacy treasures of the Apiran Tower. To achieve a victory in the world of chaos, Elder Apiran had handed these weapons over to Margaret, and she had also let her take them into the illusion battlefield. However, Margaret had never used these swords before. But in order to protect her statue, Margaret had summoned these 7 flying swords without hesitation. She would use their might to defend her statue at all costs. The 7 flying swords flew back and forth between her and the statue. They formed 7 colorful lines that protected Margaret's statue very well. Even so, there were still some cracks showing on the statue. In comparison, Nathan, who was beside Margaret, seemed to deal with the ravenous beasts with both skill and ease. Nathan had acquired nearly 300 million illusion points in the illusion battlefield already. Now, he had used those illusion points to strengthen his statue, which could naturally become much stronger than any ordinary warriors. Moreover, Nathan's strength was extraordinary, hence, he performed well in this round of competition. Of course, no matter how skillful he was, he couldn't hold a candle to Zen. Having felt bored, Zen had left his statue in another blood-red castle, and he had run over here, where he was watching the show like an idler. "Young lady, you haven't told me your name yet," Nathan said indifferently from beside Margaret. Although there was a lingering trace of a cold and gloomy aura from him, his pleasant voice and his handsome appearance quickly set people at ease. "Get out of the way," Margaret said coldly. The 7 flying swords spun even faster as they dispatched more of the fearsome beasts. Swish, swish, swish. In the blink of an eye, she had chopped more than 10 wind dragons into pieces. These wind dragons, which were the law creatures that were born in the fiercest winds, weren't very strong. However, before they died and disappeared, they would turn into countless wind blades that instantly pierced through everything. If the warriors weren't careful enough, their statues would be damaged by those wind blades. So the warriors had to be extremely cautious while they were dealing with the wind dragons. These creatures would claim a savage revenge once they were killed. Margaret did not care whether she was eliminated. After all, her master did not require her to be ranked first. However, as she was very likely to encounter Zen here, how could she give up so easily? Nathan, who stayed beside Margaret, talked to her all the time, thoroughly annoying her a lot. "If you tell me your name, I can protect you and ensure that you won't be eliminated," Nathan offered with a huge grin. As he gently clapped his hands, waves of invisible force rushed towards the law creatures. All the wind dragons within 100 feet seemed to suddenly have their throats grabbed by an invisible hand, and they were lifted into the air, where they struggled unceasingly. Then, he stretched out his hand and squeezed tightly. The hundreds of wind dragons, caught in his grasp, were broken into two by him. Swish, swish, several hundred wind dragons were instantly killed and immediately transformed into a storm of sharp wind blades, shooting towards Margaret and Nathan. However, Nathan still seemed unperturbed. With a light wave of his hand, all of the wind blades, which shot over, automatically dissipated, turning into the gentle breezes. So strong. Seeing this, Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly in admiration. She was no longer what she used to be, as her 6 years of cultivation in the Apeiron Tower had given her a whole new understanding of martial arts. Nathan's move was truly spectacular. He had actually managed to instantly dissolve the wind blades. However, after Nathan had so swiftly killed those wind dragons, a large number of the creatures stormed over, rushing towards Margaret. At this moment, Nathan did not make any moves to kill them. His figure was like the wind as he dodged, allowing the wind dragons to attack Margaret. Margaret lightly bit her dark, red lips as the 7 flying swords worked in an even closer collusion to handle those wind dragons. In truth, with her strength, dealing with the wind dragon wasn't difficult at all. But when she had strengthened the statue, she had wasted a large amount of illusion points and didn't enhance the statue's defensive power. Hence, not enough was done to make it strong enough. Thus her statue could not resist the wind blades at all. With just a slight misjudgment, her statue would be damaged with a deep cut on it. Although her sword array was powerful enough to fight against any enemy, it would still be slightly difficult to block these attacking wind blades. Pa! Suddenly, a wind blade pierced through a gap in her sword array. A part of the wind blade was not blocked by her and instantly struck her statue. It cut her statue apart. Noting this scene, Margaret got upset, and her eyes gleamed with a hint of helplessness. Nathan still wore a slight smile on his face as he indifferently looked at Margaret. With his great reputation, he was admired by most women, and even many men, who strove to be like Nathan. As long as Nathan wanted to be with a woman, many talented and charming women were lining up to accompany him. As a godly genius, he was the main character of this era. Who could oppose him? However, Margaret had been the first woman that he was interested in. He had never expected that she would be so cold to him. Being a haughty and confident warrior, Nathan truly believed that there was nothing that he could not accomplish. "Young lady, it would be a pity if you were eliminated like that, after struggling so hard to reach this point." However, Margaret continued to ignore him. She could only sneer coldly at him and continue resisting the attacks from the wind dragons. Not far away, another group of wind dragons began their assault run towards her. With a twist of her long, thin eyebrows, she summoned the 7 swords. Then they all realigned into a new spiral sword array, while Margaret dashed forward. At the same time, she took up her statue, held it tightly against her body and began to retreat. However, just as she started to back away, she saw several more wind blades catapulting towards her from the other side. The wind dragons had long ago spread across the entire castle's hall. Once a wind dragon was killed, it would release the storm of wind blades. Everyone in this hall was in danger, because the wind blades could appear at any time, and they killed indiscriminately. Many warriors had already suffered this awful fate and died because of this. As she kept on retreating, Margaret suddenly felt shocked as she noticed something. Her 7 flying swords had already formed their protective barrier between her and the wind dragons, but they seemed to not be capable of stopping the wind blades. Noticing her impending doom, Margaret bit her lips, and her eyes contained both a resentful and disappointed look. "Dang it, I almost met Zen, but now it seems as if it was all just a fruitless effort." If her statue was damaged, she would be eliminated. The realization of her dream to see Zen again would then be delayed. However, right at this crucial moment, a figure lazily drifted over. Chapter 13:10, You Owe Me a Wedding. Although she knew that she was about to be eliminated, Margaret didn't feel heartbroken. To the other geniuses in the illusion battlefield, this was a courageous battle for influence and power. If they succeeded, they would get the responsibility of shouldering the fate of the entire universe. At the same time, they would also obtain endless resources and a promising future as the reward for it. Right now, they were only one step away from reaching the peak of the entire universe. Anyone who was eliminated here and now would feel like throwing themselves off into a deep abyss. However, this didn't apply to Margaret. For her, all these trials and rewards were trivial matters. After all, her goal had never been to compete with the countless powerhouses in the universe. She had only left the purple power world to search for Zen. As for the expectations her master had for her, she didn't really care about them. She had stood out from the trillions of warriors who were competing here, but her real goal was something that most of them would find hard to understand. Despite her little interest in the illusion battlefield, she was admittedly full of regret as she was about to be eliminated. She knew that the one she was looking for was in a nearby castle right now, but the rules restricted her from going there to see him. What a pity. At that moment, a figure suddenly dashed past her, snapping her out of her trance. The figure then stopped at her side, defending her statue behind him. Puff, 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 puff. Several muffled sounds reverberated into the air as the wind blades collided against the man. Who is this guy? Why is he blocking the wind blades with his flesh body? She wondered. Even an ace talent would be seriously injured if they tried to block the wind blades merely with physical strength. She tilted her head and saw a familiar handsome face, with a soft smile hanging on his lips and captivating confidence flashing in his eyes. For a moment, Margaret wondered whether she was in a dream. Her mind was full of questions, and she was still in danger, but all these things no longer mattered to her now. She stopped controlling her 7 flying swords and they all fell to the ground with a clanging sound. Without the protection of the sword formation, a group of wind dragons once again came at her. If she didn't block their attacks, her statue would be torn to shreds at any moment, and she would be eliminated. But she didn't care about that at all. The man standing at her side had her undivided attention now. Taking no heed of anything else, she just threw herself into Zen's arms. In these past few years, she had always tried to suppress her desire to pine for him, but her longing for him had never stopped even for a second. What was worse, the more she suppressed her feelings for him, the stronger they grew. Recently, they had almost reached a point where she could hardly control them. It was at this moment that all those pent-up emotions were unleashed all of a sudden. She held him tightly in her arms as she locked eyes with him, her eyes filled with infatuation. When Margaret suddenly jumped into his arms, Zen took a small step back and gently held her up with a warm smile on his face. But he didn't ignore everything else like Margaret did. As the wind dragons rushed toward them, he waved his fingers and drew out strands of chaotic energy, causing his chaotic sea to surge with power. Many circles of light started to appear on the ground around them. He needed to protect Margaret and deal with the wind dragons at the same time, and the most effective skill he could use was the Thunderbolt Annihilation. Although the Thunderbolt Annihilation would consume a large amount of his energy, it was the most suitable strategy for such situations. A few moments later, rays of lightning flashed in the sky and then struck the circles of light. Powerful pillars of lightning shot down and instantly killed the wind dragons. The wind blades formed from the dragon's life energies were swallowed by the great power of Thunder Law. This wasn't the ordinary power of Thunder Law. Zen had actually borrowed the power of Thunder Tribulation. Even Nathan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows at this breathtaking scene. He looked at Zen with a hint of indiscernible jealousy in his eyes. So this is that Zen, he muttered to himself. He had seen Zen's statue when he'd followed Margaret a while ago, and that was how he knew what Zen looked like. With his cultivation method, he's able to borrow the power of Thunder Tribulation. Interesting. But then an important question suddenly occurred to him. Shouldn't he be in another castle? How did he get here against the rules? He wondered. Nathan didn't think too much about Zen's cultivation method. While it was true that a cultivation method of borrowing the Thunder Tribulation was rare, it was only enough to make him a little curious. As a godly genius, he was at the peak of the universe and he had always treated all opponents of the same level like dirt. What he was really concerned about was what kind of theurgy Zen had used to move freely among the castles. And then another question occurred to him. Didn't Zen need to protect his own statue? Of course, Zen didn't know what was going on in Nathan's mind. He was busy soothing Margaret while dealing with the wind dragons at the same time. I've been looking for you for a long time. Margaret complained like a kid throwing a tantrum as she nestled her face against Zen's chest. So have I, Zen smiled. Really? Her eyes immediately flashed with excitement. But her face quickly darkened as she shook her head and said, I don't believe you. It's true, believe me. Around them were many other warriors who were trying their hardest to defend themselves in order to avoid being eliminated. In contrast, this couple exchanging romantic whispers were in a league of their own. Zen retreated as he guided Margaret and her statue to a quiet corner of the castle. The enemies would come in a single direction, so he wouldn't have to pay a lot of attention to them to protect Margaret and her statue. Margaret, on the other hand, had complete disregard for the danger around them. Although her ranking was actually higher than Zen's and she was already powerful enough to fight the ace talents, she had never regarded herself as a real warrior. In her heart, she was still that little woman who liked to cook for him. And since Zen was at her side, she just took it for granted that it was his duty to do the fighting. As for the power of the rumbling thunder behind her and the danger of the enemies, she didn't even bother to turn around to take a look. She pressed her small nose against his chest like a kitten and enjoyed his familiar smell. "Why are you participating in the illusion battlefield?" Zen asked in a soft voice. Margaret blinked and replied, "Because I knew I'd find you here." Zen was amused at her unexpected answer. "I mean, how did you improve your cultivation base so much?" Through the memories of the world's will, Zen had known for a long time that she had left the original Great World and entered the Purple Power World. Before he had ascended to the upper world, he'd already known that Margaret had concealed something from him. He had tried to find out what it was, but she had always kept it secret from him. That was why he had been so shocked when he saw her statue in the castle. He knew that she wasn't the least bit interested in martial arts, but she had actually survived the first stage of the illusion battlefield and, what was more, her ranking was higher than his. He almost felt a sense of defeat at the fact. He just couldn't understand what had happened to her. Margaret smiled happily at Zen's question. She was pleased because she knew that it was finally time to tell him the whole truth. She had concealed the fact that she had taken Apeiron as her master in the Purple Power World ever since Zen and Letitia's wedding. Back then, she had been extremely disappointed and full of jealousy toward Letitia. But at this moment, she was completely satisfied. Letitia might still be cultivating in the lower world, but Margaret was here snuggling up to Zen. It was her victory. It was also the best reward for her hard work in the past 6 years. She slowly explained everything to him in detail, telling him about every effort she had made just to see him again. Zen was moved by everything that he heard from her. He had never expected that Margaret would have done so much secretly, all because she wanted to stay by his side. He felt ashamed that he had never given her anything in return. Margaret giggled as if she had read his mind. She looked into his eyes and said, "You don't have to feel guilty at all. Just promise me one thing." "What is it?" Zen asked curiously. Margaret's expression turned utterly serious as she replied, "You owe me a formal wedding." Zen stared at her, rendered speechless for a moment. But in the end, he showed no hesitation and nodded his head firmly in reply. Margaret's obsession with this matter was so profound that it had affected every aspect of her life. She had had no dedication to martial arts from the very beginning, all of her efforts had purely been for Zen. She smiled in relief when she finally got his promise. She buried her face into his chest like a kitten, her eyes full of happiness. Chapter 13:11, 300 Stars. At the moment, the warriors in the Blood-Red Hall were engaged in fighting with all their might. Only a very small number were able to battle with relative ease. Nathan was one of them. He had in his possession a number of illusion points, so the statue that he consolidated was much stronger than those of the others. If he was eliminated, the others would probably be eliminated as well. Nathan was like a living legend. He had experienced many hardships since he was a child. When he was born, the stars were triggered by him. To the Xuanyuan clan, this was an auspicious sign. However, Nathan only belonged to a distant branch of the large Xuanyuan clan. This phenomenon, which had originally been an omen of fortune, had instead brought him great trouble. One of the main branches of the clan had found his own in the shortest amount of time. They replaced Nathan with another baby and planned on drowning the real Nathan. However, since Nathan was favored by the heavens, he possessed great luck that ordinary people did not have, even if he was just a baby. Not only was he saved from getting murdered, he also grew up in a special environment. In the end, he became the godly genius of the Xuanyuan clan and avenged himself on those who had harmed him in the past. Although Nathan was confident, he was also full of distrust because of his complex childhood. So far, he had been with no woman around him. According to the rules of the 4 large clans of the Thoughtless Minds, once the godly geniuses and ace talents reached a certain age, they needed to get married. However, every suitable match was rejected by Nathan. Rumors were rife that he was possibly homosexual and only interested in men. From not far away, he heard Margaret's words and sighed with emotion. He had never met such a woman before. Wave after wave of beasts surged over. 2,500 warriors had been present in the 3 blood-red castles at the beginning, but now the number had started to drop rapidly. 2 days and 2 nights later, most of the warriors were exhausted. The beasts finally stopped their attacks. At the moment, only 300 warriors occupied the blood-red lobbies. About 90% of them had been eliminated in this round. The rules of the illusion battlefield were incomparably cruel, its final goal aimed at choosing the main character who could lead the world of chaos. In the first stage, only 2,500 warriors among the trillions of participants could win and subsequently enter the second stage. In the second stage, only 300 would be selected out of the 2,500 candidates. In this sort of competition, the final survivors would undoubtedly be the ace talents and godly geniuses of the various races. These 300 warriors were destined to become the most dazzling stars in the entire universe. Not long after, the roofs of the 3 blood-red castles opened up and fused together, forming 3 massive arched bridges. In the middle of these 3 castles, a thick purple light column rose up. Inside the light column were many fish. The momentum of the heavens and the earth spreading out was formidable enough to make most people scared. Only 100 warriors were left in each of the blood-red castles. Now that the castle was open, they leapt onto the bridge and headed for the purple light column in the center. "It's time for us to go over," Zen said to Margaret, who was in his arms. She had not even glanced at the purple light column as it appeared. She was still cuddled up against Zen. Margaret nodded slowly and followed Zen onto the bridge. The strongest warriors of the 50 supreme worlds had all gathered there. As they stood there, observing the fish swimming in the purple light column, they quietly observed each other as well. Some of them, such as Nathan and Lawson, already knew each other from before. Others had distinctive features, such as Carl. He wore a heavy armor, his face reflecting the righteousness he felt. With just a single glance, one could tell that he was the godly genius of the celestial position. It was true that Zen was famous. However, only a few warriors had actually seen him. Before he could even get close to the purple light column, someone wielded his sword and came to stand before him. "This is surprising. I had thought that with your minimal strength, you wouldn't even be able to enter the second stage. I didn't expect you to successfully enter the second stage and not be eliminated at all in the process." Interesting. Very interesting. The dark-colored iron sword in this particular warrior's hand was unremarkable and even a bit broken. He waved the sword in front of Zen with a proud demeanor. He was none other than the otherworldly swordsman whom Zen had met in the Hall of Causality before. Standing not far away, when Nathan heard the otherworldly swordsman's words, his eyes flashed. The otherworldly swordsman came from the thoughtless minds and had participated in the competition of the 4 clans, so Nathan naturally knew of him. But he was also curious and wondered how Zen had managed to offend the otherworldly swordsman. Upon hearing the otherworldly swordsman's voice, everyone looked at him. They had all heard of the otherworldly swordsman and his mystical sword. He seemed to hold a grudge against the warrior, seeing as how he was so intent on provoking Zen with his arrogance. However, none of them knew what had actually happened. Hearing the otherworldly swordsman's words, Zen was indifferent. "Indeed, it is interesting. On my part, I will at least give you a chance." "What? Give me a chance?" The otherworldly swordsman was slightly stunned at the words. "I'll give you a chance to eliminate me," Zen replied with a smile. The others were astonished at his words. Even though the otherworldly swordsman was only an ace talent from the thoughtless minds, he could be as powerful as a godly genius if he made use of his magical sword. The other warriors present wondered who the young warrior standing before the otherworldly swordsman was. His arrogance was proof enough that he despised the otherworldly swordsman, who was indeed remarkable. "Oh, really? I must thank you for giving me this opportunity." The otherworldly swordsman's eyes were full of anger. Defeated by Zen in the Hall of Causality, he was extremely indignant. To him, his failure in the Hall of Causality had been a great insult and he wanted to get back at Zen for it. Because of the conversation between the otherworldly swordsman and Zen, several warriors turned their heads to where they were. At some distance stood a woman in purple. Her skin white like snow, she was very pretty. She was Lucille, who had lost to Zen previously. When she saw Zen, she strolled over to him as soft snowflakes fell around them. Her eyes were fixed on Zen as she said, "We meet again." After entering the second stage of the illusion battlefield, Lucille, who practiced the one soul in 2 bodies, had taken the opportunity to merge her 2 beings. The present Lucille was in her true and complete form, her temperament also slightly changed. Who was she? The moment Margaret saw Lucille's beautiful face, she held onto Zen's right arm tightly. Her eyebrows knitted together as she stared at Lucille with a wary expression on her face. Noticing the intimacy between Margaret and Zen, Lucille was a bit surprised and guessed that they were in a relationship. However, she had no idea where Margaret had come from. Before Zen could say anything, another warrior greeted him, Zen. The warrior carried a sword on his back. He looked confident and energetic, with a pair of sharp eyes. He was Rocher Wa, who had finally reached the Soul Sea realm. Rocher. A smile rose on Zen's face. Meeting Margaret and Rocher here had come as a true surprise to Zen. Of course, he was delighted at the pleasant happenstance. Only after they heard Rocher call out Zen's name did the other warriors realize that the person in front of them was Zen. At this moment, both the otherworldly swordsman and Lucille, who had fought Zen before, were surprised. Ever since Lucille had entered the illusion battlefield, she had triumphed over the others. She had only been defeated by Zen so far. However, she did not expect the warrior to be none other than Zen, who often told stories through the roaring token. Chapter 13:12. Evolutionary 50. In fact, Lucille was a fan of Zen's. She used to be addicted to narratives. Because Zen was a good storyteller out in the universe, she was attracted to his yarns. Listening to his stories in her rest time had become one of her hobbies. She would while away hours listening to his stories. She had listened to all the stories Zen had told during these past few years. Whenever Zen's voice rang out, she would even stop cultivating to listen to him telling stories for several hours. These stories were all told to a mysterious girl, and, like the rest of the universe, she knew she was just a random listener. She would never have expected that the man in front of her was Zen. Besides her, the other warriors were also surprised, and they couldn't help but curiously look Zen up and down. They wanted to see what the mighty Zen, who had killed several supreme lords, looked like, and if there was anything special about him. Most of these warriors were curious about Zen, but some of them secretly harbored a killing intention behind their studying looks. The ace talents and godly geniuses present were all at the top of their game, and were thought highly of by their own clans. They were either the direct descendants of the Supreme Lords, or those guided by the Supreme Lords. After their talents were discovered, they had been valued by their clans. The 4 Supreme Lords Zen had killed before were all related to these warriors, so they naturally regarded Zen as their enemy now, since he had killed their clan members. Zen did not seem at all bothered by their hostility, and he talked happily with Rocher in a low voice. All of them had been waiting here for about an hour already. During this time, Zen was listening to Rocher relating what he had experienced in the past 6 years in the lower world and the upper world. Margaret's experience during these few years could not be spoken of in the same terms as Rocher's experience. She had only cultivated in the purple power world all this time. She had never left the purple power world. However, Rocher was different. From crossing the chaotic ocean of stars to traveling in the 4 divine kingdoms, his experiences were thrilling and exciting. The most important experience was the time when he was on the savage land. With the aid of something great that Rocher had gained there and his own talent, he had made such a great achievement. As for what the great thing was, Rocher did not tell Zen the details. Zen naturally would not question him too closely, for that would have been rude. Everyone had their own secrets, and Zen understood that Rocher must have a reason why he did not want to explain. In fact, Zen had searched for that information in the memory of the Great World's will. The Great World's memory recorded everything that happened every second of every day, and he could search for information by using a thought. However, when Zen was trying to search for the information, he found that the Great World's memory of this part was blurry. It seemed that someone had erased the Great World's will. All the memories about the savage land were blurry, and he could not find anything useful. This was so strange. Zen wondered why the great world he was in suddenly had so many secrets. The ancestral dragon was born on the Divine Kingdom continent, and there were many world lords, dead bodies gathered below the sea god continent. Moreover, the savage land, where he had not been, had such secrets. These things could not be said to be mere coincidences. The two of them were having a good talk. Margaret thought their conversation was boring. However, since she had not seen Zen for a long time, she was already satisfied just by being able to hear Zen's voice. Not long after, the cold voice of the mysterious girl rang out again as she ordered, "Warriors, you may now enter the purple light pillar in front of you." After her voice faded away, the ace talents, who had already waited for a long time, began to enter the purple light pillar. After they each walked into the light pillar, there was a gentle buoyancy which slowly lifted them upwards. "Let's go," Zen said to Margaret as he walked up to the light pillar. The moment Zen stepped into this purple light pillar, he sensed a strong momentum lifting him up. This momentum was so complex that it seemed to have originated from the mixture of all the profound meanings. It's the will of the heavens. Zen's face grew serious as he realized the truth about the momentum. This momentum was not a new thing to Zen, and many of the warriors present had even experienced it before. When warriors underwent their tribulations, the momentum emitted by the terrifying heavenly tribulation represented the will of the heavens. Fishes were swimming slowly within the purple light. When the fishes drew close to Zen, they could easily pass through Zen's body. The moment these fishes began passing through Zen's body, they left a trace of their comprehension behind inside his body. This is the rule of the heavens. Every fish contains a rule of the heavens. The marks they each leave can benefit us a lot. During a warrior's cultivation, after the initial opening of the soul sea, he had to start to build his inner world. At the beginning, there were no rules in their inner worlds but only their seas of life vitality, which contained no life in the beginning. After these fishes passed through a warrior's body, they left behind the rudiments of these rules. These were very useful for the establishment of rules in their inner worlds. This kind of benefit could not be found anywhere else in the universe. In the entire universe, only 300 warriors were gifted with the baptism of the purple light. No wonder that so many races and clans all attached importance to this illusion battlefield. Even the supreme lords of every race could not give them this kind of experience. After all, these supreme lords were only able to instill comprehension of the rule of one heavenly destiny in their people. But they could sense every rule of the entire universe here. Everyone closed their eyes as they focused on comprehending the marks which these fishes had left inside their bodies while slowly flying upwards in the purple light. Zen was also comprehending the marks as he slowly rose upwards. Once a sea of life vitality turned into an inner world, it was fully controlled by its owner. Nothing could be accomplished without obeying standards and rules, so only by gradually establishing these rules could one make his entire inner world function normally. They were not able to control the rules of the heavens in these fishes. After all, each rule was a heavenly destiny. Only a supreme lord could control one heavenly destiny and make full use of it. But the warriors could use these rules as reference points to build the rules of their inner worlds. In fact, all warriors who entered the purple light had this comprehension. Except for one warrior who had not comprehended at all, Margaret. Right now she was still looking at the fishes with a confused expression as she held tightly to Zen's hand. The other warriors, including Zen, were all shocked by the enormity of the will of the heavens. However, Margaret felt very different from the others. She felt quite indifferent since she had not been enlightened by this law at all. She had a familiar feeling in the momentum emitted by the purple light. It was exactly the same as the momentum which was released when she had cultivated a special mind method. The only difference was that this momentum was much older and more mature than the one in the mind method. The mind method had been passed down to her by her master. According to what her master had said, that mind method was created according to the rules in the purple power world, and only warriors with first-rank purple power body could cultivate this method. She did not overthink it, so she could not figure out the connection between these two types of momentum. But she was not interested in figuring it out. As they rose up to a certain height, the mysterious girl's commanding voice was heard by every one of the warriors. Of the evolutionary 50, only 49 are useful. Of the evolutionary 50, separate one into two. One is variable, and the other one is definite. Meanwhile, the 300 warriors continued to slowly rise up vertically. But right now, everyone's rising path began to change. Many warriors were flying to the left side of the light pillar. The left side is definite, you can't change your fate. A few others flew to the right side of the light pillar. The right side is variable, your futures are limitless. About 200 warriors had been moved to the left side of the light pillar. They were surprised and disillusioned when the mysterious girl announced that their fates were unchangeable. However, there were 99 warriors at the right side, and their fates were changeable. Their destinies were, according to the mysterious girl, limitless. What's going on? Why is there one warrior missing? The mysterious girl wondered aloud. Since the mysterious girl had hosted the illusion battlefield from the beginning, her voice had always been cold, without any emotion. After all, she was the arbiter of the illusion battlefield. Except for the time that she laughed and joked with Zen, the others all felt she was indifferent and almost apathetic. Noticing the strange scene, her originally solemn voice suddenly changed. These assembled ace talents all felt her tone was now strange, and they opened their eyes one by one, confused. They were even more confused after they had opened their eyes. Moments earlier, the mysterious girl had separated the warriors to two sides by defining their fates. There existed only two kinds of fates. One was variable, and the other one was definite. However, there was one warrior still floating in the center of the purple light pillar. The warrior floating alone in the center of the light pillar was none other than Zen. Chapter 13:13, A Place with Many Talents. The mysterious young girl looked at Zen through the layers of clouds and the purple light. Her eyebrows were knitted together, her expression of stunned disbelief. Zen is without destiny. There were few warriors in the universe who didn't have a destiny, and they always went through a slew of terrible experiences. The common folk didn't know how the man without destiny had appeared, but the mysterious young girl was very clear about it. A living being was always born with its fate predetermined, and none in the universe could escape its destiny. To become a warrior without destiny, one had to be someone who didn't come from the heavens or someone with a firm belief. They had to have experienced many cycles of life and death to erase their own destiny. But what was Zen's purpose of becoming such a warrior? The mysterious girl was lost in deep thought, thinking about Zen's request to find Yan. Zen was confused at the mysterious girl's words. Evolutionary 50, did it have anything to do with the 50 supreme worlds in the illusion battlefield? Separate one into two, one is variable, and another one is definite. Why did people have to be divided into two sections? What was the purpose? At the moment, there were 200 warriors with definite destiny and 99 warriors with variable destiny. Margaret and Rocher were warriors with variable destiny, while Nathan was one with a definite destiny. It was obvious that the division was not based on a warrior's strength. Since I'm one without destiny, does that mean I can't be considered to be a warrior with variable fate? Zen found this entire matter of destiny to be too mysterious. He couldn't immediately figure this out, so he simply stopped thinking about it. Perhaps there was some invisible force in the universe that secretly set everything right for him. But Zen would only act according what his mind and beliefs told him. He could live compliantly if his destiny conformed to his wishes and plans. But if his life came into conflict with his expectations, then he would, without a doubt, revolt against it. And then, suddenly, the pyramids that the names had formed at the top of the illusion spaces began to dissipate. The light from the stars in the sky had also been withdrawn from atop of the various supreme worlds. All Soul Sea Realm warriors, apart from those 300 warriors, returned from the illusion battlefield. Letitia stared at the collapsing pyramid, her eyes flashing. Is the competition in the illusion battlefield over? She asked. Preston smiled and shook his head. The most important part of the illusion battlefield is to strive for being a top warrior. This is only the beginning. But you'll see more than just names soon. I can also see Zen, right? Letitia asked, her eyes narrowed. Preston nodded. According to the usual practice, yes. But I don't know if Zen has been eliminated or not. The second stage of the competition in the illusion battlefield is very intense, and there are a lot of ace talents fighting to stay in the competition. It is already very good that Zen has ranked in the top 2,500. But I'm not sure if he can become one of the top 300 warriors and remain in the illusion battlefield. The 2,500 warriors would undergo multiple rounds of elimination during the second stage. But from the moment they had entered the blood-red castles, the names of the top 2,500 warriors had already been fixed in the list. No one knew if they were eliminated or not. And now was the time to publish the results. Just as Preston was talking to Letitia, the illusion space within the large hall began to shine, bursting out into magnificent colors. These colors looked like the most illusory energies as they began to flow and mix with each other, creating a magnificent picture of the wonderland at the top of the hall. The picture contained glimpses of celestial mountains, clouds and mist, buildings, and a lot of other beautiful imagery. Many figures could be spotted standing on top of the clouds. This image of evolution gradually appeared on every illusion space in the universe. In fact, both the illusion space and the roaring token relied on the law of causality in terms of operation. The roaring token used the law of causality to push sound through the universe, while the illusion space used the law of causality to create a projection. The illusion space was not a product of the universe, but a benefit that the mysterious girl had bestowed on the entire universe. Thanks to her permission, many sacred places could now easily create illusion spaces. At this moment, warriors of the entire universe could see the picture through reverse projection in each illusion space. As the figures became clearer, Letitia turned more serious by the second. Every warrior who was paying attention to the illusion battlefield also realized the gravity of the situation and sobered down. I see him. Letitia's eyes were now fixed on Zen. Her excitement rose to the top, now that she had spotted him. She had maintained her reverence for the upper world ever since she had ascended to it. Soul Sea Realm warriors were rare and powerful in the great world she was in, but there were a number of warriors at this cultivation level in the universe. There were so many talents that even a 10th grade sacred place wouldn't be able to control a supreme world. And there were 100,000 supreme worlds in the universe. There were greater opportunities and challenges here. She had originally thought that it wouldn't be easy for him to enter a 10th grade sacred place. Yet, she hadn't expected him to become a top warrior in just a few years. Zen, the man she was looking at right now, was her pride. She felt joy at this, but as another thought crossed her mind, her brows knitted and she became visibly upset. A woman was snuggling up to Zen, her face full of happiness and joy. She was Margaret. Is Zen one of them? Can you see him? Preston, who didn't know who Zen was, asked Letitia. Letitia's lip trembled but she collected herself before saying, yes. He has indeed lived up to everybody's expectations. Congratulations, Preston said, smiling warmly. But when he saw Letitia's expression, he couldn't help but think, Letitia should be happy to see Zen. Why does she look so morose? So he asked again, which one is Zen? The 13th warrior from the right, Letitia replied flatly, without looking up. Preston looked, but he was surprised as his eyes landed on Zen. Preston was also an intelligent warrior and quickly gauged that something was wrong. The 13th warrior from the right was a handsome young man, but beside this young man was a beautiful woman who was leaning close to him. No wonder Letitia was pulling a long face. Everyone was curious about a lot of things, and Preston was no exception. Right now, he was greatly interested in Zen. He thought Zen was a charming man who attracted beautiful, remarkable women. He knew that the woman with Zen also probably had extraordinary strength and Zen might also have started a romantic relationship with her in the short time he was in the illusion battlefield. These mere thoughts caused Preston to marvel at Zen. The truth was that apart from Preston, every warrior of the universe could see Margaret snuggling up to Zen. And they really looked like a happy, young couple. Those who knew Zen admired him. They also knew that the woman was bound to be at least an ace talent from a great force. Zen was amazing to have fallen in love with her during the short period of time they had been in the illusion battlefield. Their relationship had really developed fast. Those who did not know him were also impressed with him. They were also secretly speculating on Zen's and Margaret's identities. Could it be that these two were a rare couple who had cultivated together and had simultaneously been ranked in the top 300? Look, that must be Zen. Margaret indeed has an eye for having chosen such a remarkable man. That guy is pretty handsome. Margaret is regarded as the ace talent in our purple power world, so of course, the one she takes a fancy to must be the best. Since the purple power world had a special interface, it was impossible to construct an illusion space there. This meant that many warriors of the Apeiron Tower had to leave the purple power world and go to another supreme world to watch Zen. Preston couldn't help but ask out of curiosity, do you know the woman beside Zen? Margaret Letitia replied icily. Letitia had known that Margaret was among the top warriors, but seeing this with her own eyes filled her with disappointment and sadness. Oh, you know this woman, where is she from? Preston asked one question after another, his curiosity growing by the minute. She's from the same great world as I am, Letitia answered resignedly. What? Preston exclaimed, stunned. Of the 300 warriors chosen in the illusion battlefield, 2 of them were from the same great world. This coincidence brought Preston to the point where he couldn't make sense of the situation. In the 3,000 supreme worlds of the Humanity Alliance, only 4 warriors had had the chance to enter this stage of the illusion battlefield. Zen was one of them. How was it possible for 2 warriors from the lower world to get this chance? This was inconceivable. Do you mean to say that Zen and Margaret come from the great world that you ascended from? Preston asked, wanting confirmation. Letitia was not in a good mood. She pointed to one of them and said perfunctorily, why is it that amazing? The 16th warrior on the right is Rochewa, and he also comes from the same great world as me. He is one of the disciples of my Cloud Hall. Chapter 13-14, A Double-Edged Reward. Through his rigorous hard work and cultivation, Roche was able to ascend to the upper world. But before ascending to the upper world, Roche didn't disaffiliate from the Cloud Hall. So, in a way, he could still be considered as a Cloud Hall disciple. In the Cloud Hall, Roche was under Letitia's wings. In other words, he was her disciple. Still, Preston of the Pure Jade Sacred Place could not believe every word Letitia had said. But looking at her face, he could see no sign of deception, not even a stutter when she spoke. Yet, he still had reservations about Letitia's story. Out of these 300 people, it was astonishing that 3 came from the same great world. Meanwhile, Letitia was in awe. Although she was not from the upper world, she knew that these 300 people were the most outstanding warriors at the Soul Sea realm. Since she was from the lower world, she had not clearly understood the significance of these 300 ace talents for many races, the glorious future they would have, and the resources and effort required to nurture an ace talent. Preston, on the other hand, knew this quite well. Even a 10th grade sacred place like the Pure Jade Sacred Place didn't have enough resources to nurture an ace talent. Thus it was still not qualified to cultivate one. As Letitia turned to look at Preston, she noticed the skepticism on his face. She cleared her throat to get his attention and then bluntly said, "Zen is also from Cloud Hall. And just so you know, he is also my disciple." This caught Preston off guard. He felt as if Letitia saw through him and sensed his doubt. He froze and got lost in his thought. When he finally came back to his senses, he asked, "If you don't mind, can you tell me how Cloud Hall is ranked?" If Preston remembered it right, Lower World didn't have any sacred place above the 8th grade. "Well, it is considered as a 6th grade sacred place," Letitia humbly replied. The Cloud Hall was acknowledged as a 6th grade sacred place given its current status in the central region. "I see," Preston said. In the upper world, a 6th grade sacred place was considered as an ant, small and unspectacular. The Pure Jade Sacred Place had countless small sacred places in its jurisdiction that were at least in the 8th grade. So with that said, a 6th grade sacred place like the Cloud Hall was not even qualified to be a subordinate of the Pure Jade Sacred Place. And if someone like Preston would personally visit a 6th grade sacred place, its Saint Lord would probably kneel before him and welcome him with open arms. But how could two warriors from a 6th grade sacred place like Cloud Hall be in the top 300 of the illusion battlefield? That thought had left Preston puzzled. He still couldn't figure out how such a bizarre thing could happen. Letitia just ignored Preston and continued to stare at the illusions outlined on the illusion space. At that moment, she suddenly remembered the time when Margaret had entered the purple power world with her mysterious expression. Back then, Letitia didn't think much of Margaret, but it turned out that she was ready to surprise the universe with her performance in the illusion battlefield. Meanwhile, all the forces in the universe were paying close attention to the painting above the illusion space and were discussing it among themselves. Our Xuanyuan clan has Nathan on the stage. He will win the first place. Our Lucille has made it to this stage. I just hope that after this battle, she will be able to step into the godly way and become a godly genius. The ogres will have berserker warriors. These went on with the rest of the forces that had at least one of their own make it to the 3rd stage. There were also some martial artists from the Mist Palace who extended their necks to see their peers on the painting. As expected, Zen has passed through the 2nd stage, and is now part of the top 300 warriors, Chiron said as he shook his head and laughed. He was the former leader of the Mist Palace. Master. Standing next to Chiron was his disciple, Layla. Layla had been qualified to move forward into the 2nd stage, but unfortunately, didn't make it past to the next. She also missed the opportunity to meet Zen inside the illusion battlefield. Layla was in the same blood-colored castle as Margaret, while Zen was in a different one. She had already been eliminated when Zen made it to the blood-colored castle she used to be in. "Well, I'm extremely proud of what you accomplished in the illusion battlefield. You making it to the 2nd stage was already a great accomplishment," Chiron said with a smile. Deep down, he knew that his disciple did her best. As a master, Chiron knew how difficult it was to complete the illusion battlefield. Even a few ace talents with great power were also eliminated from the 2nd stage. So, he knew that Layla had given it her all, but the 2nd stage was just much tougher than the previous one. "Who is that woman besides Zen?" someone suddenly asked. Yolanda, who was standing in the middle, stared at a woman who she couldn't recognize at all, Margaret. Even her clones in the eastern region and the sea god continent in that great world had never seen Margaret before. "If my memory serves me right, she used the sword formation of the purple power world," Layla replied. The sword formation of the purple power world that Margaret used was quite special, and it left a mark on Layla. From then on, Layla could not forget Margaret's face. "That girl, is she an ace talent from the purple power world? Look how attached they are with each other just after a short period." Someone ridiculed and laughed. "From how I see it, they must have been together for quite long." Meanwhile, in the illusion battlefield, Zen remained where he was as he waited with the other warriors. After entering the purple light, the warriors found themselves in this misty fairyland. There was a new and strange feeling in their hearts after they were baptized by the countless rules of the heavens in the purple light. The imprints that the fish left within their bodies allowed them to establish the first laws of their inner worlds. So while waiting, they focused on comprehending these new laws. Out of the blue, the mysterious girl's voice sounded once again to make another announcement. Attention warriors! In this round of the illusion battlefield, the top 10 warriors will receive a godly plate. Once you get the plate, I will personally imprint it in your body. Then, a short whirring sound followed. 10 gray plates slowly faded in and floated in the sky. The 300 warriors looked up and their eyes glimmered when they saw the 10 gray plates unveiling in the sky. But not all warriors knew what these plates were, especially those who didn't know much about the illusion battlefield. Some of these warriors were Zen, Margaret, and Rocher. Zen, do you know what she's talking about? Have you heard of the godly plate? Margaret asked while still looking at the floating gray plates. Zen just shook his head. He didn't even know if Margaret saw his gesture. It was also his first time to see the 10 gray plates in the sky, and this scene left him baffled. In the corridor of Emperor, Zen learned that those vying to be a true god would have to obtain a godly tile. But as for the godly plate, he didn't know what it was for and had never heard of it until this moment. Seriously, you don't know what those are? A warrior next to them sarcastically asked with a disdainful look on his face. The inner world won't be able to contain the godly tile on its own. The godly plate, as its name suggests, is a place where the godly tile is stored. So, you first must have a godly plate in your inner world where you can put the godly tile. I see, but my next question is, where does the godly tile come from? Margaret continued to ask. I can't have all the answers, can I? The warrior said. There were only a few true gods in the universe. Meanwhile, the warriors currently in the illusion battlefield were either ace talents or godly geniuses. They could become true gods, but since they were at the Soul Sea realm, they were still hundreds of thousands of miles away from becoming true gods. The warrior who told Margaret about the godly plate had only heard of the secrets about it, so he couldn't answer Margaret. You are the ace talents and godly geniuses in this grand era, so this round of the heavens is in your favor and will give you the greatest chances. If you don't make it to the top 10, you will still be strengthened. The basis of that will be on how you strengthened your statues in the second stage. The mysterious girl's voice continued. After the warriors heard this, their faces were filled with surprise and joy. Back in the second stage, they put all their illusion points into their statues. Their illusion points strengthened their statues in terms of power, soul, or some law. The warriors that had put more illusion points were able to strengthen their statues to the maximum. They had initially spent tens or even hundreds of millions of illusion points that greatly strengthened them. Now, their own bodies would be strengthened based on the illusion points that they had initially invested. No one had expected to receive such a reward. When Zen heard this, he was equally delighted and surprised as the rest of the warriors. He knew that his statue was far stronger than that of others. It could be said that his statue was as strong as himself. So, could that mean that the enhancements would also be applied to himself? Surely, those who make it to the top 3 will also receive other rewards. But I must warn you that the more rewards you receive, the heavier your burden will be. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As soon as the mysterious girl's voice was done speaking, a huge square board measuring 1,000,000 feet long and wide appeared in front of them. Before the warriors could react, something happened. A pink shadow appeared in the middle of the board. The warriors couldn't make out the face of the shadow, but when it spoke, they knew it was the host of the illusion battlefield. Zen also stared at the figure, trying to figure out the identity of the mysterious young girl. The figure appeared to be using an unknown technique. Whenever Zen quickly glanced at the figure, he could tell that it was a graceful lady. However, when he looked carefully, the figure would become blurry and could hardly be distinguished. Chapter 13:15. Have no fighting will. The pink figure danced gently in the air and descended slowly like a fairy in an illusory world. Just like Zen, the entire universe knew of this mysterious girl's existence. However, they had no idea about her origins, goals, or even where she existed outside the illusion battlefield. Like Zen, the other warriors also wanted to see how she looked, but her outline was blurry and her exact appearance wasn't clear. When the pink figure floated to the edge of the board and came to stand before everyone, she waved her hand and a number of black and white stones appeared around her. These stones were about 10 feet in diameter and floated in the air, drifting towards the 300 warriors. Ladies and gentlemen, please step onto the stones. The woman in pink said, her voice rather stern. People discovered that the voice came from the sky above and not from her. It was likely that this pink figure was not a real person but just an illusion. But she was still the host of the illusion battlefield, and as the sound of her voice faded, each of the 300 warriors stepped onto a stone. Margaret did not want to be separated from Zen, but she had no other choice. Those who were really paying attention noticed something. The 300 warriors had earlier been split into two groups within the purple pillar of light. One group of warriors had fixed fates, while the other group had unfixed fates. And right now, the stones beneath the warriors with fixed fates were all white, while those beneath the warriors with unfixed fates were all black. Although Zen was in neither of these groups, he was standing on a black stone as well. Whooshing sounds could be heard everywhere, leaving onlookers surprised and confused. The moment everyone stepped onto the stones, they were sent flying into the air by the woman. The warriors that stood on the black stones were on one side, while those on the white stones were on the other. The woman was floating in the middle. This was the final battle of the 300 warriors in the illusion battlefield. But to the woman, it was within the variables and determinants that she had to deduce the destiny of this round of Grand Era. The great crisis that broke out during any round of Grand Era was usually a grand competition that used the universe as a board and countless creatures as stones. She had no way of knowing where the crisis would come from. But it would be a predetermined deduction if the ace talents of the universe were to gather together and play a go game. She wanted to see if the crisis in this round of Grand Era came from the variables or the determinants. Right now, countless eyes were watching what was happening on the board. Everyone from the 128 Supreme Lords to normal warriors was paying close attention to this. Some warriors were even seeing this as an excellent chance to throw a gambling party and had already started placing bets on these 300 warriors. The woman in pink stretched out her hand and waved it, as if to make a casual grab. An enormous hand appeared from within the endless clouds. The crowd could see that the huge hand belonged to a girl. The fingers were thin and the skin was smooth and fair. The index finger of the hand pressed down on a white stone and the nail of its middle finger clamped onto the bottom of the stone. The person standing on this white stone was an ace talent of the Saya race. He was also startled when he saw the giant forefinger pressing down on him, but the forefinger was not real and could not touch him. It pierced through his body and was pressing down on the stone. Once the huge hand had grabbed the white stone, it pressed down on the 100,000 feet long board. It crunched as it fell onto the board. The board seemed to reverberate with the crisp sound of the stone falling. The Saya race warrior was still standing steadily on the stone. He knew that his opponent would be a warrior among those standing on the black stones. Soon, his hunch was confirmed. The huge hand withdrew into the mist, reached out from the other side, and grabbed a black stone. And this time, the giant hand was holding onto Margaret's stone. Margaret was stunned. She hadn't thought that she would be the first to fight another warrior. The black stone fell to the board with a thud. Both of you can fight. You need to fight till we have a clear result. But do not kill your opponent. The mysterious girl's voice rang out once again. Hell no, I don't want to fight, Margaret said, her eyes wide and face gloomy. She didn't like fighting, but the number of times she had fought with others in the illusion battlefield was most likely 10 times more than what it had been before she had entered the battlefield. In the previous 2 stages, Margaret had put her life on the line as she fought. But it was because she had a motive, and that was to see Zen. Now that Zen was by her side, a part of her long-cherished wish had been fulfilled. Fighting with others meant nothing to her. She turned to look at Zen, her heart filling with this gloom. But Zen smiled encouragingly at Margaret and said, "Do your best." Margaret nodded reluctantly. What she didn't know was that her master, Elder Apiran, was somewhere in the universe, nervously watching her along with a group of her disciples. Margaret doesn't seem to have any fighting spirit. I know why. She cares for nothing but her man. She doesn't have much interest in cultivation. This is truly unfair. The heavens gave her such stunning talent, but didn't give her the heart to pursue cultivation. Margaret thought for a while, and then stepped off the black stone. Although she was still conflicted, a light flick of her fingers brought 7 differently colored flying swords floating out of her body. These swords gradually dispersed. She stared at the warrior of the Saya race, who was standing close by, smiled and said, "You can start." Zen shook his head at how this scene was playing out. Margaret did not show any improvement. She did not have any fighting spirit, and she was no different from who she had been all those years ago. Zen really didn't understand how she could have gotten so far in the illusion battlefield. But what Zen didn't know was that Margaret had been a completely different person in the first stage of the illusion battlefield. At that time, in order to find Zen, Margaret had traveled through the cities in the illusion battlefield. Her aura hadn't been strong in the first place, and she looked like a delicate human girl. So naturally, she had been ambushed a number of times. Her mind had been extremely stable and filled with fighting spirit. Whoever stopped her from finding Zen would become her mortal enemy, and thus, she would be like a goddess of death, killing a terrifying number of warriors. But right now, all she wanted was to stay by Zen's side. How could she have any fighting spirit? Now that she was forcefully dragged into the fight, she had no choice but to make a move. It looked like she was being forced into a corner. When the Saya warrior saw that his first opponent was a delicate woman without any fighting spirit, he smiled, satisfied. The Saya race had been silent for too long. This ancient race was only a second-class race in the universe. If he took first place in the illusion battlefield this time, obtained a godly plate, and became a godly genius in the future, he would lead his race to glory once more. Thinking of this, the Saya warrior rolled his shoulders in preparation. Two thin totems emerged from behind his shoulders, an ancient aura emanating from them. The Saya race was also an ancient race, and they believed in their ancestors. Each generation of the Saya race was accumulating power for the next. As the son of the Saya race's 36,330th chief, he could obtain great power from his ancestors. I only need to display 20 to 30% of my power in the first match, he decided as he faced Margaret. He then pulled out a black pike from behind him. Chapter 13:16, Ulysses. In the Saya race's grand sacred place, a giant totem was erected. An illusion space was present at the bottom of this massive totem. The picture appearing from the illusion space manifested in front of the totem. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of Saya members sat around the totem, gazing at the giant picture in front of them. The Saya race could only be considered a second-class race in the universe. Only one Supreme Lord had appeared in the race and there had never been a true god. The entire Saya race relied on the Supreme Lord, and struggled to support themselves in becoming one of the first-class races. However, compared to the first-class races such as the human race, the demon knight race and the ogres, the Saya race appeared to be very weak. But today, the most outstanding talent of their race had ascended the peak of the illusion battlefield. It was a rare opportunity for the Saya race to rise in the universe. This talent was like a precious seed that would eventually grow into a giant tree. Sooner or later, he would become the new protector of the race. He might even become the first true god of the race. Ulysses' first opponent is a human woman. He's pretty lucky that he hasn't run into any of those godly geniuses. This woman doesn't seem to have any fighting spirit. Ulysses is bound to win the battle. Hundreds of thousands of Saya members began to discuss it among themselves, their words like a chant. It was akin to the buzz of bees. The atmosphere around the giant totem thrived. Under this massive totem, the chief of Saya race raised the pike in his hand and held it parallel, a gesture for the others to keep quiet. The Saya members fell silent as the chief howled, "Our ancestors will bless the Saya race. They will bless Ulysses. Their souls will never die." Buzz. The Saya members echoed at the same time. The giant totem was the ancestral totem of the Saya race. Upon the death of the warriors of the Saya race, their flesh would be burned away, but their souls would remain forever. The Saya members had poured the souls of their ancestors into the ancestral totem. The totem was unable to protect the souls from being destroyed, but with the infusion of countless ancestral souls, it contained the will of many ancestors. Buzz. At the same time, on the giant board, the two totems behind Ulysses' back emitted faint lights. Holding the black pike in his hand, Ulysses had a faint smile on his face. "Father, you're too nervous. You have summoned the ancestral power in the first battle for me, but I don't actually need it." When the ancestral power was summoned, all totems of the Saya warriors were able to transmit the strong power. However, the ancestral power was not only owned by Ulysses himself, but also by the other warriors of the Saya race. It was only during the wars that the Saya warriors called on the ancestral power. But now, for the sake of Ulysses alone, the ancestral power had been summoned. It was in some ways a waste, because Ulysses alone was battling it out while the ancestral power was supposed to be directed toward all Saya warriors. It also meant that the Saya race obviously attached great importance to him. "If that's how it has to be, then I must show my immense prowess in the first battle," he murmured. The black pike swung in Ulysses' hand. He smiled at the delicate human woman apologetically before darting toward her like an explosion. The area on the board was vast. The giant hand had landed the white stone in the middle of the board, which was also called the sun. Therefore, Ulysses was standing in the middle. Margaret, on the other hand, was resting on one of the stars. A distance of tens of thousands of feet extended between her and Ulysses. However, at Ulysses' sudden move, the distance between them was reduced to a mere few hundred feet. A lean afterimage dragged its way, and after a certain point, it completely disappeared. When Ulysses' figure reappeared, Margaret found that he was only 10 feet away from her. The black pike in his hand was also 10 feet long. Whoosh! The pike was suddenly shoved toward her. However, what Margaret saw was a giant black python. The scales on the python's body shone with black luster. Circling in the air, it opened its large mouth to devour her. The ancestors of the Saya race worshipped the 4 sacred beasts: black luster python, illusory demon porcupine, magic cyan condor, and ever-sleeping oryx. Although the outsiders did not know enough about the 4 sacred beasts, the beasts held a great position within the Saya race. Margaret was somewhat impetuous to begin with. Fighting others was something she had detested from the start. When she saw the giant python open its mouth wide and reveal its dense fangs, panic involuntarily surfaced on her face. With a single thought, the 7 flying swords came spiraling over. Shoo, 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 shoo. The 7 flying swords instantly formed into a defensive sword array, acting as a blockage in front of Margaret. However, this simple sword array was unable to stop Ulysses' pike. A pike's shape was similar to a spear, but the difference was that a spear came with a hard pole, while a pike's body was thinner and softer. Seeing this somewhat clumsy sword array, Ulysses chuckled faintly. Previously, he had thought that he would use about 30% of his strength to defeat this woman, but he now realized that he had overestimated her. He did not know on what basis this human girl was able to make the top 300. In his eyes, she was even weaker than some of the core disciples of a random 10th grade sacred place. This battle was too easy for him. The black pike in his hand vibrated, and the black python it formed coiled around itself. It charged left and right, sensing the flaws in the sword array and instantly piercing through it to head straight for Margaret. Arg! Now that her sword array was unable to stop its opponent, Margaret's expression grew even more panicky. In a moment of desperation, a purple ray of light spread out from under her feet. She circulated her body movement skill and increased her speed by more than 10 times as she quickly retreated. Standing atop the stone, Zen stared at the scene before him, rather speechless himself. He had never seen her actual strength before, though she had entered the final stage of the illusion battlefield. Now that she was in a face-off against a member of the Saya race, she could only flee. He could not understand what Margaret had relied on to earn so many illusion points. It was not just Zen who had such thoughts. As the 2 of them fought, the other warriors on the board and the rest watching the fight from around the illusion spaces were bewildered. How did this woman get to this stage? The women in the purple power world were the most puzzled. Margaret came from the purple power world, and right now, she represented them. Although she had a lot of shortcomings, her talent was undoubtedly indescribable. She had the first-rank purple power body and could unleash a strong battle power even though she was only at the Soul Sea realm. What happened to Margaret? She seems rather afraid of her opponent. If this goes on, she will lose in 3 moves. The women were anxious. In the end, they cast their gazes toward the old woman behind them, Elder Apiran. When Elder Apiran saw this scene, she shook her head. However, no trace of worry marred her features. Instead, she said, she's acting impulsively. Perhaps she needs some time to get used to it. The woman's sword array is nothing good, but her escape speed is first-rate. Ulysses thought. His pike pushed and prodded, easily breaking the sword array, but Margaret had already retreated tens of thousands of feet. Seeing this, Ulysses sneered. From one of the totems behind his back, a brown halo of light spread out. Aru! A loud and clear condor cry sounded. Activating the ancestral power, he now had the speed of the magic cyan condor. His 2 hands spread out, transforming into a condor's posture. He formed illusions in the air and drew closer to Margaret. The black pike once again closed in. At the same time, he had a serene expression on his face. With this level of strength, I think it's best for you to humbly admit defeat. Margaret, who had retreated tens of thousands of feet, looked up at the condor that was charging at her. A grave expression entered her clear eyes. Earlier, she had not been mentally prepared. Her only goal in the illusion battlefield had been to meet Zen. Now that she had achieved that, she no longer wanted to fight anyone. But now, not matter how much she wanted to back down, the person before her was still going to defeat her, or even kill her. It was useless to blindly give in. Moreover, at this moment, she remembered her master's instructions. It was not important that she got a rank, she just wanted to do her best. She could not get eliminated in the first round itself. As she thought of this, Margaret's pupils widened. The 7 flying swords turned around at the same time and shot into the sky, forming a surging purple river. Chapter 13:17, Admit Defeat. A strong killing intent surfaced on Margaret's elegant features. Purple River Sword Array. Her master had told her that the Purple Power World was an independent world and did not belong to the universe. It had once been the cultivation place of a true god and was a world that he had created himself. However, the rules of the heavens could not reach the place, so the Purple Power World could only be considered a broken plane. Things such as roaring tokens and the illusion space which contained the law of causality could not be passed on to the Purple Power World. The Purple Power World had inherited the general sword array, which was the colorful sword array. The colorful sword array was indeed powerful, and any girl with the purple power body could cultivate it. However, other than the colorful sword array, there were 3 more powerful sword arrays in the Purple Power World. One of them was the Purple River Sword Array, which could only be cultivated by women with a purple power body at least at the 3rd rank. 4,200 warriors in the Purple Power World could cultivate this sword array. The second of the 3 powerful sword arrays was known as the Two-Mode Sword Array, which women with a purple power body at least at the 2nd rank could cultivate. Over 80 women in the Purple Power World could perform the array. The last one was the God's Killing Sword Array, which was the legacy of the true god who had created the Purple Power World. Until now, the only one qualified to inherit his sword array was none other than Margaret herself. That was to say, only Margaret was able to cultivate this sword array, and she was the only one who had successfully mastered this sword array in the entirety of the Purple Power World. Ever since Margaret had entered the illusion battlefield, she had not used these 3 very powerful sword arrays. In the previous fights, she had only used the colorful sword array as a defensive maneuver against the attacks of her opponents. Margaret was not a person who liked fighting. Ever since her childhood, she never liked swords or sabers or the like. Even though she came from a martial family, she was more interested in needlework and cooking. Just now, she had been completely flustered and put in a passive stance. However, while Ulysses had been forcing her back all the way, she became more aware that if defeated by him, she would probably be wiped out from the battlefield. Not only would her master be disappointed, but it was possible that she would not be able to accompany Zen here. In truth, even if she lost in this battle, she would not be eliminated. However, Margaret was ignorant of this. When the purple river in the sky spread out, the many ace talents on the stones looked on, their eyes lighting up. "She's fighting back. That's what a fight should be like," one of the ace talents said as he gazed at the purple river. Previously, Margaret had been trying to escape. Obviously, her heart was not fully in the battle, nor did she have a strong desire to win. The 300 warriors were all of great backgrounds. With her low strength, they felt that she did not deserve to stand with them. However, what they did not know was that Margaret did not even wish to be alongside them. With the sudden activation of the Purple River Sword Array, 7 swords flew into the river. A mysterious gesture from Margaret had the surging Purple River coming down from the skies. As the Purple River flowed downward, it transformed into a magnificent waterfall. However, what formed this waterfall was not water, but rather purple sword shadows. Under Margaret's control, the purple sword shadows came to her. As her 10 fingers flicked away, the purple sword shadows charged straight toward Ulysses. Ulysses had planned to end the battle as soon as possible. To him, it was meaningless to fight it out with such a weak human girl. Defeating her would not bring him honor in any way. However, when he saw the sudden appearance of the purple river, his pupils dilated as a sense of danger rose in his heart. He focused attentively on what he was about to face. Without hesitation, he swung the black pike in his hand. The 2 totems behind him suddenly flew out and hovered in the air. "In the name of my ancestors, reinforce my body." Countless specks of light shot out from the 2 totems in the air. These specks of light were the souls of the many ancestors of the Saya race that had accumulated over generations. As the dots of light floated out, Ulysses' figure began to glow with a dazzling light. He still held the black pike in his hand. With the support of the ancestral power, the aura emitted from him began to change. In this moment, Ulysses was no longer alone. He was now fused with the ancestors of the Saya race. Both Ulysses' physical body and strength were enhanced to their limits. Right now, he was even capable of competing with the martial artists of the ogre race. "It is just a sword array. See how I break it." Ulysses took a step forward. He did not dodge nor evade the attack, instead, he charged straight at the Purple River Sword Array. Waves began to surge in the river formed by the streams of purple sword shadows. They headed straight for Ulysses. Ulysses was like a reef within a river, but he was unafraid. The purple sword shadows, despite being sharp, instantly shattered upon colliding with him. Seeing this, Ulysses once again stepped forward. The ancestral power of Ulysses can sense his ancestor, Drake. Before he entered the illusion battlefield, he was unable to do so. I never thought that after entering the illusion battlefield to hone his skills, he would make such a progress. The sword array of that human girl is indeed mysterious, but compared to Ulysses, she is far too inferior. Ha! However, a strange expression appeared on Margaret's face. My master told me before that it is impossible for anyone to use brute force to break the Purple River sword array. The Purple River sword array is not a changeable one. Usually 27 or 81 types of variations are common for a sword array. Some of them even have 1,000 variations. However, there are only 3 variations in the Purple River sword array, and it's because of the lack of rich variations that there are almost no loopholes for it to be broken. But this man, he dared to charge ahead and try to break it up just like that. Margaret pursed her lips. Thinking some more, she waved her finger. She decided to transform her sword array. The Purple River sword array had 3 variations. The first was the array charge, which could be used to attack opponents with purple sword shadows. This was the first movement of the sword array. The power of the Purple River sword array itself was strong, but the array charge was not anything extraordinary. However, the moment the second transformation began, everyone could tell that it was meant to kill. Spinning trap. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The Purple River, which had been rushing ahead, now changed directions. The purple strip formed into a vortex that spun non-stop around Ulysses. After Margaret transformed the array, he foresaw that something terrible would happen. With the support of ancestral power, his state of mind underwent a drastic change. Right now, he should be invincible. However, the Purple River turned into a whirlpool, trapping him within it. I refuse to believe that I can't break this sword array. Ulysses roared out once again. The 2 totems floating in the air rotated faster and faster, and the radiance on his body grew brighter. However, after being trapped in the Purple River, he discovered that the sword array could be as firm as a rock, or as soft as jelly. He had no way of breaking free at all. Annoyed, he cursed himself for being so easily trapped by Margaret. Upon seeing this, many of the other ace talents stared at Margaret and her sword array, their eyes full of dread. In their eyes, although Ulysses of the Saya race was an ace talent, he was not a very powerful one. Still, this girl, Margaret, had easily trapped him within her sword array. The power of the sword array itself was extraordinary. Now, you can be the one to admit defeat, Margaret said to Ulysses in a low voice as she stepped out of the sword array. Defeating the person in front of her had not been too difficult a task, but there was no happiness on her face, as this victory was completely meaningless to her. I haven't lost yet. Ulysses could not accept this result. Because the warriors of the Saya race worshipped and believed in their ancestors, they attached great importance to honor. After all, in their hearts, their ancestors were always by their side. Margaret blinked, her fingers enacting a profound sword tactic. Her face was marred with exasperation. Then I will change the sword array again. The third transformation of the Purple River sword array began and a cold killing intent burst out from the center of the Purple River. The 7 swords suddenly reappeared and transformed into a gigantic sword shadow, chopping down at Ulysses' head. Chapter 13:18, Praise. Margaret no longer hesitated at this moment. She was already very proficient at the Purple River sword array. At the third stage of the array, which was called the meteor shower array, she ordered her 7 flying swords to make a joint attack on her enemy. 4 years ago, her master had told her that the power of the meteor shower array would allow her to fight most ace talents from large races. Master, what is an ace talent? She had asked her master back then. They are the elite warriors with the greatest potential from the large races. Are they even stronger than Zen? To that, her master had only rolled her eyes and hadn't said anything in reply. According to the Celestial Position's estimation of Zen's talent, Zen did have the potential to become an ace talent, but whether he could defeat the other geniuses still remained uncertain. As for Margaret, she had already been able to fight against an ace talent 4 years ago by virtue of the Purple River sword array. Now, she was even stronger after mastering the God's killing sword array. It was a pity that she didn't care about martial arts at all. She had neither realized nor appreciated her great potential and strength. But there was one thing she understood at this moment. She either had to choose to avoid the battle or to end it quickly. Of course, she had no way of escaping from a battle on the heaven-earth board, so she decided to kill her opponent as quickly as possible. It was a pathetic result for Ulysses from the Saya race. He didn't even have the chance to unleash his full strength before he was trapped and killed by Margaret's Purple River sword array. Not that it mattered, of course, considering the large gap between their true strengths. Even if Ulysses were to use his most powerful skill, it would only be a small obstacle for Margaret. The battle between Margaret and Ulysses was the opening match of the third stage and thus had attracted everyone's attention. Unfortunately, this battle was far from exciting. Margaret's negative attitude at the very beginning had taken many people by surprise. But all of a sudden, she turned the tables after revealing her surprising strength and defeated the ace talent from the Saya race quite easily. Even Zen hadn't been able to understand what was going on in Margaret's mind, let alone the rest of the audience who didn't know her well. In fact, Elder Apiran might be the only one who could have understood the girl's strange actions and know her reasons for behaving the way she did. Of course, to the Saya race, this result was like a slap on the face. They had never expected that this delicate human girl, who had been dodging attacks all over the place in the beginning, would defeat Ulysses so easily. The Saya people stood silently under their huge totem. Even the light emitted by their totem had dimmed a bit. Theoretically, their ancestors' souls had already turned into a kind of will and had been observing their descendants, so they could feel the low spirits of their young members. After a while, a new white stone appeared in the sky, and Ulysses, who had been defeated a few moments ago, reappeared on it. According to the rules that the mysterious woman had announced previously, no warrior would be eliminated in this stage. They would all keep being revived and be randomly selected to fight against one another. This meant that Ulysses might still have a second chance to prove himself. Margaret's figure also disappeared from the original black stone and reappeared on a new one. Controlling the stone, Margaret slowly floated back to Zen's side. Thus, one black stone and one white stone remained on the board. What powerful means you used. Margaret, I didn't know that you've become such a strong warrior. Zen praised with a smile when she came back to his side. With his current knowledge, he was well aware of how powerful the Purple River Sword Array was. He had even started to wonder why there was such a great inheritance in the seemingly tiny purple power world. Margaret was slightly stunned by his praise, but then a sweet smile appeared on her face. In the past, Zen had rarely approved of her, so she was glad to see the change in his attitude toward her. She slightly raised her nose and said with a proud smile, "Wait till you see my full strength." Oh, Zen was a bit surprised. "What is your trump card?" She grinned cheekily and said, "You will find out later." After the first two stones were arranged on the board, the mysterious woman announced in an indifferent tone, "The winner of the first round is Margaret Shi from the Purple Power World." After that, a huge hand appeared from the sky once again and grabbed a white stone. The person standing on it was an ogre ace talent. Next, the hand grabbed a black stone with a human ace talent from the Humanity Alliance on it. Zen hadn't met this human warrior before, when he was in the Mist Palace. This ace talent was the descendant of Supreme Lord Illusion and hadn't cultivated in the 13 palaces. This battle turned out to be far more exciting than the first one. The two ace talents were evenly matched and both of them exhausted their strengths. As they fought, they dashed from one corner of the board to the other. Cracks appeared on the Heaven-Earth board because of their intense battle but soon disappeared, having been automatically repaired. In the end, the winner was the Ogre Ace talent. These 300 warriors came from many different races, and it was really hard to say which party would win in every battle. The warriors from the three greatest human forces remained calm and composed. The result of a battle didn't necessarily mean that one race was inferior to the other. However, after the Ogre Ace talent had defeated his human opponent, he began to laugh arrogantly and said, "The humans think of themselves as the leaders of the universe, but they are actually a group of weak cowards. They are nothing to be afraid of." The truth was, the rise of the human race was a fact that was widely accepted by the universe. Not a single race, including the ogres and the demon knight, was able to fight against the human race. However, the three greatest forces of the human race were at odds with each other and had formed a situation of mutual restraint. If these three forces could put aside their prejudices and form an alliance, there would be no room for the other races to develop and compete with them. So naturally, this Ogre Ace talent's mockery didn't make sense. Human elites like Nathan, Lawson, and a few others didn't even blink an eye. As far as they were concerned, this ogre was acting like a clown. But the 300 warriors who were present in the illusion battlefield weren't the only ones who had heard his words. In the 30,000 to 40,000 10th grade sacred places of the three greatest human forces, numerous human warriors were watching this scene through the illusion spaces. When they heard the ogre's words, they were extremely angered, and most of them called for the human participants to defeat the ogre. Of course, their voices couldn't be heard by the warriors in the illusion battlefield. Coincidentally, the same ogre warrior was chosen to fight again in the third round. Many people started to question the mysterious woman's method of selection. They became even more confused when they saw her next move. The opponent she selected for the ogre was yet again a human warrior, this time, an ace talent from the blessed Buddha land. In the end, this human warrior was also defeated by the ogre. After winning twice in a row against human warriors, the ogre warrior grew even more arrogant. He taunted the human race once more before returning to his stone on his high horse. This time, his mockery infuriated many of the human participants in the illusion battlefield. They all swore in their minds that they would teach this guy a good lesson if they got the chance. The battles continued. As the black and white stones kept being added to the board in every round, the number of stones left on the board slowly increased. Zen, however, still hadn't been chosen to fight. When the 22nd round came, the ogre warrior was selected again by the huge hand. Interestingly enough, his opponent was once again a human warrior. This time, it was Nathan. Nathan was the so-called number 1 Soul Sea Realm warrior in the universe, undoubtedly an important figure in the whole grand era and the famous godly genius from the thoughtless minds. When he stepped onto the stage, all of the human warriors that were watching through the illusion space began to jump for joy. They knew how this round would turn out and they could barely contain their excitement. After all, the ogre warrior had it coming. At the same time, the atmosphere around the ogre warriors who were watching the battle became tense. After all, Nathan's reputation was not only known by the human race. Since he was a godly genius, he would be able to grasp a godly way and had the possibility of becoming a true god. There were only a few godly geniuses in the entire universe, and Nathan was known to be the strongest one among them. There was no need to mention how famous he was in the universe. After the black and white stones were set on the board, Nathan stepped off his stone. His face was completely void of emotion as he slowly walked toward the other side of the board at a steady pace. As for the ogre warrior who had previously provoked the human race, it was obvious that he knew that Nathan was not an opponent to be trifled with, because his face was filled with caution. He understood that he wouldn't stand a chance against Nathan, but as an ace talent representing all ogres, he wanted to do his best at least. It had never crossed his mind that there would be no time at all for him to display his full strength. Nathan defeated him with just one hit. Chapter 13:19, Terrifyingly Strong. Nathan casually struck the ogre martial artist with the most ordinary palm print. Once he'd made the palm print, he turned around and left without taking another look. There were countless different kinds of palm prints in the universe, such as the blessed Buddha land's anti-demon palm print, the immeasurable palm print, the diamond palm print, and so on. So it was surprising that the palm print that Nathan had used was the most ordinary and unremarkable one. It was condensed from the life vitality within one's body and could be released by any martial artist. However, Nathan was still Nathan. Although he had used the most ordinary palm print, his palm print still contained the aura of a great way. When the ogre martial artist saw the palm print hovering over his head, he naturally wanted to dodge. But before he could take a step forward, he realized that he had fallen into a trance, unable to move and unable to resist. This was the power of the way. The 3,000 godly ways were 3,000 great ways. Each way had a different set. The godly way that Nathan practiced was a well-kept secret. This was because the Xuanyuan clan that Nathan belonged to was a very unique clan. Out of the 4 great clans of the thoughtless minds, the Xuanyuan clan was the most powerful one. In the other 3 clans, which included Lucille's clan and Janet's clan, godly geniuses had been rare and even didn't appear in some generations. In other words, the other 3 great clans only had ace talents and no godly geniuses. But in the Xuanyuan clan, godly geniuses kept coming into being. What was more, each godly genius of the Xuanyuan clan was born with a different godly way. Obtaining a godly way, such as the G clan's 5 elements godly way, was considered an amazing thing as it rarely happened in other clans. But every time a godly genius was born in the Xuanyuan clan, they would train in a different godly way. The various beings in the universe could never understand why and never would, as the Xuanyuan clan had always regarded their godly ways as the greatest secrets of the clan and would never reveal them to the outside world. Originally, many people had wanted to force Nathan to make a move and see what kind of godly way he cultivated. But as his palm print came down, although it obviously contained the power of the great way, they could only tell it was the simplest life vitality palm print. It was truly impossible to distinguish his godly way. Bam! The big palm print covered the sky above the ogre martial artist and slammed into him. At this moment, Nathan had already returned to his own stone. It seemed as if he did not care about the result, but the truth was, he was just that confident that the ogre ace talent would not be able to dodge his palm print. He had instantly killed an ace talent like it was child's play. This was the strength of a godly genius. This was Nathan's strength. This scene stunned the other ogre warriors. Many ogre martial artists were also gathered in the outside world, watching this scene through the illusion space. When they saw their ace talent provoke and defeat the human warriors again and again, they felt satisfied in their hearts. The world of chaos was often accompanied by the rise and fall of great races. The chaotic battle was not only a battle for the position of the leader of the universe, but also for the rise and fortune of an entire race and clan. If an ogre ace talent emerged as the champion in the illusion battlefield, he would most likely be able to reverse the fate decided by the heavens and lead the ogres to a flourishing future. The ogre warriors were violent and bloodthirsty, and at the same time, they held pride and glory in the highest regard, so they would never be willing to be inferior to others. After being suppressed by the humans all these years, the entire ogre race was filled with severe hostility. If they had the opportunity to turn the situation around, they would definitely counterattack. So now, they all had their eyes glued to the illusion space as their ace talent faced off against yet another human warrior, and they were eager to see him emerge victorious once again. However, the casual palm print from Nathan left them all completely stunned. Norvin, the ogre ace talent that Nathan was battling against, was the third-ranked ogre ace talent. Yet, in Nathan's eyes, he seemed to be only worth this ordinary slap. The gap in their strengths was too wide for the audience watching to accept. Even Zen, who was standing on a black stone, was surprised, and his eyes flickered slightly. This is the power of a godly genius. He sighed in his heart. He had to admit that even he couldn't do what Nathan had just done. If Zen used his full strength, he might be able to kill the ogre ace talent with a single slap. However, it would be impossible for him to be so relaxed while doing it. On the other hand, Nathan's posture had been so relaxed that it seemed that his palm print was nothing but a casual gesture. Nevertheless, Zen was clear that it would have been impossible for Nathan to defeat the ogre ace talent that easily with strength alone. Even if there was a huge gap between them, their strengths didn't vary to that extent. The key was still in the aura of the great way contained in the palm print. When Zen looked over, he could feel an indescribable aura emitting from it. However, he was unable to determine what kind of godly way it was. Soon, the next round of battle began. Stones fell one by one once again. However, many of the discussions of the warriors in the outside world were still focused on Nathan. There were even many who concluded that there was no need to continue with the battle in the illusion battlefield as Nathan was definitely the victor. No one would have thought that after another 3 rounds, the ogre warrior called Norvin would be selected to fight again. Among the 300 warriors in the arena, most of them hadn't fought a single battle. For example, Zen, Lucille, and Lawson hadn't fought at all. But this ogre ace talent called Norvin had been selected for the 3rd time. No one knew the mysterious girl's selection method. Perhaps she had her own motives for arranging the battles this way. When the ogre warrior had been suppressed by Nathan's big palm print, his heart had been filled with fear, but more than that, he'd seen it as a great humiliation. He had known that he would definitely lose to Nathan, but he had never thought that he would not be able to withstand even a single blow from him. The ogre martial artists regarded defeat as the greatest humiliation. So now that Norvin had been called to fight again, he was eager to wash away this shame. This time, a beautiful hand in the sky placed him down on the board, and then once again picked another human warrior. This human warrior wielded a dark-colored sword. It was the ace talent who had died once before because of Zen, Lone, the otherworldly swordsman. This time, my opponent is finally somewhat normal. A dark and cold expression appeared on Norvin's face. He was no match for Nathan, but he was not afraid of ordinary human ace talents. Lone had only earned fame recently, and that too only within the thoughtless minds. Other races and forces were not familiar with him, not to mention that he had lost 5 million illusion points because of Zen. And with his own 12 million illusion points, his ranking was not high at the first stage. As a result, he was inconspicuous. Only those who were from the thoughtless minds knew. Although Lone was an ace talent now, he definitely had the terrifying power to fight a godly genius himself. A cold smile appeared on Norvin's face. He wanted to return the humiliation he had suffered to this ace talent in front of him. As the 2 stones were relatively close to each other this time around, Norvin was the first to make a move when Lone was just placed down on the board. He immediately struck with his strongest move. Immeasurable dark power. The supreme divine weapon in his hands was a giant drum, and within the drum was a heart, a powerful heart that had been beating for tens of thousands of years. However, just as he revealed his strength, Lone expressionlessly slashed out. This sword strike was similar to Nathan's palm print, in that it was just as simple and just as unstoppable. When Norvin saw the incoming attack and felt the hidden might within it, he couldn't help but curse in a low voice, "Dang it." Chapter 13:20. A Game of Chance. The power in that sword strike was beyond anything Norvin had ever imagined, and it caught him off guard. Nathan was a godly genius and his Mahayana lotus flower was in perfect state. Thus it was expected that he could send out an extremely formidable palm print which contained the force of great Wei. The otherworldly swordsman, on the other hand, was an ace talent whose Mahayana lotus flower had not yet reached the perfect state. Hence he could not have stepped into the godly Wei just yet. Norvin underestimated the otherworldly swordsman, and that was his biggest mistake. The moment he attacked, Norvin wasn't prepared. He didn't expect that this seemingly ordinary otherworldly swordsman could release such immense power. His body started trembling and he was having trouble catching his breath. For the first time, he felt scared for his life. The otherworldly swordsman was just an ace talent, but the power that he released was far greater than Nathan's. Norvin could compare Nathan's comprehension of the godly Wei to a newly sprouting seed, while the power of godly Wei that this otherworldly swordsman had put into his sword strike was like a full-grown tree. This analogy, however, was based solely on the comprehension level of the godly Wei and had nothing to do with physical power and strength. But no matter how much Norvin thought about it, he still couldn't figure out how such an ace talent could harness this incredible power. Unfortunately, he wouldn't get a chance to find out. As the ordinary sword strike drew closer, Norvin was pushed to the edge and had no room to dodge. It pierced through his body and his blood slowly poured out from where the sword struck. The otherworldly swordsman had cast a contemptuous glance at Norvin, and when he was certain that the latter was done for, he had withdrawn his sword and returned into his stone. Norvin from the ogre race has been defeated. Many ogre warriors from different sacred places including the supreme lords and world lords were the rowdiest in the crowd during the fight between Norvin and the otherworldly swordsman. They were not in a good mood when he had lost in his last battle, so this time, they cheered on him from the top of their lungs. But as the news of his second defeat was announced, they became silent, trying to comprehend what just happened. No one could believe that Norvin was defeated for the second time. Meanwhile, the humans, especially those in sacred places of the thoughtless minds, were cheering with excitement and overflowing joy. One move. It just took one move for the otherworldly swordsman to defeat Norvin. That's incredible. I knew it. The otherworldly swordsman is a supernormal talent. Although he is an ace talent, he can be at par with the godly genius when he uses his mysterious iron sword. Ha ha, I'm not sure how Norvin would move on from this. This time, he is a disgrace to the ogre race. The warriors from the tens of thousands of sacred places in the thoughtless minds couldn't help but feel proud. Aside from them, the Humanity Alliance and the Blessed Buddha Land also felt overjoyed. This was a glorious moment for the human race. Who would have thought that this ogre would be defeated by a human ace talent? These moments had bridged the gap between humans from different worlds and statuses. For a moment, their seemingly divided worlds were united. Chaos was set aside, and harmony was restored even for a short period. Meanwhile, back in the pure jade sacred place, Preston was impressed by the turn of events. He said, "Quite impressive. The representatives from the thoughtless minds are quite remarkable talents. They did well this time. I'm afraid that those talents from the thoughtless minds will surpass those from the Humanity Alliance this time." I'm speechless. The supreme worlds controlled by both the Humanity Alliance and the thoughtless minds were on the same level in terms of power. But the thoughtless minds, supreme worlds, had far more resources, treasures, and talents than that of the Humanity Alliance. Besides, the Humanity Alliance was just formed by combining the forces of various human sacred places, while the thoughtless minds was a major force led by the four great clans with a strength that the Humanity Alliance could not measure up to. These warriors are truly remarkable. They are powerful beyond measure, Letitia remarked. Although she did not understand the otherworldly swordsman's sword strike, she knew that the power within it was incredibly formidable. Preston thought he sensed the concern on Letitia's voice. He assumed that Letitia got worried for Zen after witnessing the previous fight. To calm her down a bit, Preston uttered, "It's already quite an accomplishment for Zen to make it to the top 300, you see. Even if he fails to go further, he already made name for himself by lasting this long in the illusion battlefield. He will surely be given high status and great rewards once he returns to the Humanity Alliance." Letitia was stunned after hearing Preston's words. But she understood what he meant and appreciated why he did that. She just smiled and said, "I am not worried about Zen. I know what he can do, and I have faith in him." "I see," Preston replied. He looked at Letitia and saw the confidence radiating through her face. A strange expression appeared in his eyes. He knew about Zen's majestic strength and skills. But there were also even stronger ace talents and godly geniuses from various races in the illusion battlefield that he had yet to fight. Compared to those ace talents and godly geniuses, Zen could be considered as mediocre in power and skill. But Preston didn't want to burst Letitia's bubble. So, politely, he asked, which rank do you think Zen will get? In the top 50, top 10 perhaps. The top 300 warriors could be regarded as ace talents. The warriors who could advance to the top 50 would only be the most powerful ace talents. But to make it to the top 10, they must either be godly geniuses or those at par with godly geniuses like the otherworldly swordsman. Letitia tilted her head, thought for a while, and then said, I think he can make it to the top 3. At least. Preston didn't expect that response from Letitia. With an awkward smile on his face, he replied, I know how confident you are in your husband's strength, but I'm not sure if he can be among the top 3 warriors. I mean, no offense. I'm just trying to be realistic here. Preston couldn't help but smirk. Letitia just slightly raised her eyebrows at Preston's remarks but just shrugged him off. She just couldn't stand Preston's annoying laugh. Letitia knew Zen far better than anyone else, and she would always have faith in Zen no matter what others would say. Back when she just had ascended to the upper world, she had no clue of Zen's current situation and position. He was just a life and death realm warrior before he rose into the upper world, but just after spending 6 years in the upper world, he had already greatly improved his strength beyond Letitia's expectation. The past 6 years that Zen had spent in the upper world was just a fraction of a second to his lifespan, which she thought would be over 10,000 years. In Letitia's assessment, if Zen had spent more time cultivating himself, he could become the greatest warrior in the universe. However, 6 years of training in the upper world wasn't enough time for cultivation. In the illusion battlefield, Zen was bound to meet ace talents and godly geniuses from various forces. Some might think that he wasn't prepared enough to face them in a battle. But Zen had always triumphed in his past competitions and he had never disappointed others with his performance. With this, Letitia believed that he could make it into the top 3. She chose not to refute Preston's remarks. It was enough for her to know how great Zen was. Soon, she knew that Preston would regret making those remarks and would marvel at Zen's outstanding performance. Meanwhile, there was probably no warrior who felt more dejected and morose than Norvin, the defeated ogre warrior. Earlier, he felt ultimately lucky to get chance to fight consecutively while other warriors didn't even have a chance to fight. But now, he was just too scared. He had lost the desire to compete against other warriors and would just want to leave this place. Norvin wasn't afraid to die inside. Besides, there was no dying inside the illusion battlefield after all. He was the kind of ogre that had high value for glory and triumph. But when he was put in the heaven-earth board and attacked by other powerful warriors, it felt like an endless torment for him. Unfortunately, the battle on the heaven-earth board was something out of his control. In the heaven-earth board, no one could control who they fought with. Unlike in the first 2 stages where warriors could cherry-pick their targets, in this stage, they had no idea who they would be dealing with. The giant beautiful hand would select the warriors who would be facing each other and decide the rules and mysteries that would await them in the battlefield. And Norvin wasn't fond of surprises, especially when it came to battles. He didn't like the uncertainty there was in this stage. He was just defeated by the otherworldly swordsman in a battle when suddenly, the stone under his feet was once again gripped by the giant hand. Norvin was dumbfounded. He wanted to oppose the decision, but he knew it would only be pointless. Unable to resist, he could only hope that his next opponent would be somehow inferior to him. He would be at the disadvantage if he faced the godly genius. However, he also didn't want to fight the weakest opponents as it wouldn't be any much of a thrill. With a long face, Norvin could not help but just watch the giant beautiful hand in front of him pick his opponent. The giant hand landed on another black stone. Another human warrior. Norvin's eyes widened as he glared at the human warrior. His body froze and his hands began to tremble. He was afraid of facing a human warrior again. Finally, the mysterious girl's voice announced the players. Norvin of the ogre race versus the human warrior, Zen Luo. Zen Luo. Norvin was shocked. He felt like the stars were conspiring against him. The universe was so vast that not all remarkable ace talents were known to all the races. Most often than not, these remarkable ace talents were only known by their own races. That was why Norvin didn't recognize the otherworldly swordsman at the beginning. But Zen was different from them. His name was known in almost the entire universe. There was no living creature that had not heard of his name. The humans, the ogres, the demon knight members, the members of those insignificant small races, and countless ordinary mortals were all familiar with his name. Even the fierce beasts and animals with high intelligence knew his name. They could also hear and understand his words. After all, he had the roaring token. Whenever he would speak through this, his voice could spread throughout the whole universe and all intelligent living creatures in the universe would hear and understand him. But despite his fame, only a few warriors had seen his true strength. Those warriors were either the ones he had faced before or his dear friends.